right, welcome back to part 2 of the Bryan Kohberger change of venue hearing. Says court is on break until 1:45, so they changed it, but that is 4:45 Eastern time. So I have the feed started. It is live. Volume is on. Everything is ready to roll. So as you come in, please say hello in the chat. If anybody's chatting, I'm not seeing anything. Hopefully, this is not a wonky. Oh, there we go. Hey, Kel. Kel's like, eyeballs. Eyeballs. Thank God they're not these eyeballs. Oof. Right? Bam. Bam. All right. So we are waiting on. They were supposed to be back at 1:30 PT, 4:30 ET. But they did say that they were going to give 10 to 15 minutes of it. The first 10 to 15 minutes back would not be streamed to the public because they're things that they didn't want to be seen public. However, family of the victims are in the courtroom and via Zoom, apparently. So, I'm eager to see what, they're going to show. But hi, Kel. Welcome back today. I hope you've had a great day today, Kel. Hey, Margaret. Hey, Gail. Patricia. I'm on for this one first. Wait. I'm on time for this one. First time this week. No worries. I'm glad you're here. I love that you're here, even if it's 5 minutes before we end. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming and hanging out, Patricia. Let's see. Morgana's here. Hey, Morgana Banana. All right. So, just a quick bus update. Kiddo got off the bus. Everything was fine and dandy. Except it's 1,002 degrees outside. And, those dang school buses, 99% of them do not have AC on them. So when she got off and she's on the bus for a while. I mean, it's almost 4 o'clock before she gets home. But she got off the bus and her whole little face was just beet red. She comes straight in the door and she wants something to drink and her shoes off, obviously. So, God love her heart. I couldn't tolerate being on a hot bus for that long, so. Kel says, I'm still at work calling around for tile samples for a new renovation project. Cool. That's fun. Love it. Morgana, I know, right? She says it is so hot. Ugh. It's so hot. It's gross hot. If they are on time, then that means that they will be starting in about 3 minutes. So I need to figure out this whole situation with I keep playing with like my box and the stream box here in StreamYard. I keep trying to get it just so. And, yeah, I keep trying to get it just so. Bum 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 bum. Bum ba da bum bum ba da bum. Bum ba da bum bum bum. Oh, I'm ready for fall too, Morgana. The only thing that worries me is every fall, it seems like with each passing year, fall has always been my favorite time of the year. But I've noticed the past several years now, when fall lands, I start feeling that depression setting in. So I don't like that part of it, but like the seasonal depression, that is no fun. Kel said filling in a spreadsheet with all of the prices and availability. That sounds like fun, though. I mean, you're good at that kind of stuff, so, you know. I'm just fiddle farting around back here behind the scenes with this. You can't see anything until I get it situated. But I'm trying to fix it. Hey, Charlie. Hi, good to see you back. 6. Does that mean you're number 6? Did you click the thumbs up and you're the 6th one? Thank you, Morgana. Yeah, make sure you guys put your DNA all over that thumbs up button. Every time I see that red and blue DNA emoji, it makes me, I think it's like a hard piece of candy with the twisty on the ends. You know what I'm talking about? That's what it looks like. It looks like a piece of candy. I'm like, why are they putting candy? And then I realize that it's DNA. I'm so silly sometimes. Hey, Steph. Oh, wait. She says, is it just me or is Jenny breaking up a little bit? Am I breaking up for you guys? Just you, says Morgana. Okay. Patricia said, fine for me. All right. Good deal. Your stuff's broken, Steph. Go fix it and then come back. Fix your stuff and then come back 1 year. Take the corn out of your ears, ma'am. Take the corn out of your ears. Bum 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 ba-dum. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum. All right. Let me save this and see. What do you guys think of this? I don't like it. Steph loves corn. I don't like it. Oh, Steph said, I think maybe it was because I came from a video that was at 1.5 speed. So it was trying to 1.5 speed live. Gotcha. That's what it was. I know what you're saying. I've done that before. Hey, Miss King. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. Welcome back. I don't know. What do you guys think of this? Like, my box being as tall as the video box? Or should I see it? And it's gonna depend on what it looks like when it's actually live. I'm a weirdo. I can't just leave things as they are. I get bored easily with layouts of everything. I mean, even where I put my dishes in the cabinets, like I get bored and I'm like, okay, I think I want to put the plates on this side and the bowls on this side. So I'm like switch things up all the time. But Steph said, I hate watching these because I want details so bad, but I know we won't hear any yet. Steph, not that box, ma'am. I don't talk about that box. And I'm not talking about the box that was on my front porch either. I have not opened that box yet. Uh-oh. I just heard Dad yell at kiddo. Margaret said, would you please? The marching band is going to run out of oxygen. Ay, 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 ay. All right. So, come on, it's 4:49. What are we waiting on? What are we waiting on? Let's go. I don't like it. I don't want it, Margaret. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. Okay. Tell me though, I mean, when you guys watch live stream videos like this on other channels, how do you prefer the setup? Do you like it when the person streaming is small and the video is big? Or do you like it when the person streaming is big and the video is still bigger? Or, like, do you want me to just leave altogether? Not like that. That's not what I wanted. No, that is not what I wanted. I didn't want that. Where did it go? Where did it go? Or like that, where I'm little, like small, or like that, where I'm like way over here in like a rectangular. I mean, how do you like it? I don't know. Margaret said, don't leave altogether because Steph will start talking naughty. I know, right? You can't leave Steph alone for 2 seconds. Nah. You can't do it. Come on, Judge. Judge. Morgana said bigger. Well, what bigger, though? Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm going to have some coffee. I had some water a while ago. My water. Water. Me bigger, you bigger. Bigger. Right. Steph says, no, I'm not reading that. I saw the word about 6 words in, and I'm like, nah. Along with the charge word, no. No. Steph, you nasty. All right. Hey, Billy. Welcome back. Welcome back. I do need to go get some coffee. I need to go get some coffee. Let me go do that real quick. I'll put, I was going to say I'll put some music on for you, but I guess I can pause the stream. I can pause the stream and then speed through it because I'll only be out a couple seconds, minutes, hours, days. I'm kidding. Put some hold music on for us. Can she please be put in timeout, Margaret? agree. Steph needs a timeout. Okay, I'll put some hold music on for you and I will pause the stream for a moment. Just paused it. I will put hold music on now. Let me go find it. I will put this on. And I will be back in the moment or two. Well, why did it quit? I didn't put it on loop. Okay, I got to put it on loop. Loop. Okay, here we go. All right, and back. Okay, I got something floating in my coffee already. I mean, really? I don't know what it was. It wasn't a bug. I don't know what it was, though. All right, now.
Assessor.
Okay, so they are back. Let's scooch on through. All right, here we go. Here we go.
Okay, we are back on camera. Sorry for the
Patricia, I know I like it too.
disruption about that, but we're going forward now. Okay, Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. Your Honor, may I attempt to share my screen?
Yes.
Yummy coffee. Community attitude
All right, Dr.
survey.
Owen, let's talk about community attitude survey. What is that?
Lord.
Well, it's a survey designed to estimate opinions and experiences in greater populations, which in this case are the prospective jurors in Latop County.
Is there a specific way you set up to do a survey?
Yes, of course.
Can you tell us about it?
Sure. So A lot of the design and structure of these surveys is based on some of the guidelines, professional guidelines from APOR, which is the American Association of Public Opinion Research, and the ASTC.
Oh, Pilola, they just started back. They took an hour and a half lunch break, and they just started back a couple minutes ago for like after lunch. So they're back.
Which is the American Society of Trial Consultants, and also 40 years of people doing this. So the way it works is we randomly select people through a random digit dialing approach. So it's a probability sample. Everybody has a known chance of being included. And the first section is a screener to assess to make sure people are jury eligible. So they have to live in the county, have a driver's license, or be registered to vote, be 18 and over, and so on. And then they're introduced to the survey. There's an introduction actually at the beginning, even before they answer a question, or they're told why they're being called, or calling to get their opinions about an upcoming trial, and that their opinions are important because they were selected as a representative, household or whatever in the community. And then after they go through that screening process, they're instructed that there's no right or wrong answers to any of the questions. They can always report that they have no opinion or they don't know, and everything will remain anonymous. So the first few questions try to measures just basic criminal justice attitudes to get them familiar with the process, familiar with the survey, answering questions. And then they're introduced to the actual case through the case recognition question. And then if they know about the case, they continue and are asked prejudgment questions, open-ended questions to assess some key opinions, then case knowledge questions, which are recognition questions. And then they go into the demographic section, which is how they consume media. And yeah.
You mentioned two organizations, and I think earlier you mentioned that you were regularly a member of those organizations. Do they help set standards for how surveys should take place?
They do.
And tell me a little bit more about the introduction. Why do you do that?
The first introduction or the instruction after that? They get through the screener.
The introduction and then the instruction.
Yeah, well, you're trying to encourage people to participate to increase response rates, right? So you're told, again, why you're calling. It's not a sales call. We're calling to get the opinions of people in your community and why. So it's not just random. So they understand it's about an upcoming trial. We don't tell them what trial because that would clearly lead to potential response bias. And they're encouraged to continue participating because they represent their community. They were selected randomly. And then there's efforts to increase response rates by we do callbacks. So everybody, each member is called up to 3 times at different times of the day. So if somebody maybe is at work, you still have a chance of being included in the survey. There's soft conversion techniques. So if somebody's kind of on the fence, like maybe they're like, maybe I'm busy, can you call me back? We try to find out when can we call you back so we can talk to them later, just to encourage them to participate and not drop off. So all of that stuff is done to increase response rates as best we can. And that's all starts with the introduction. And then the follow-up introduction or instruction kind of is similar. It explains there's no right or wrong answers. They're not forced to say yes or no. They can say no opinion, I don't know. They can refuse to answer the question, all of those things.
Can they answer some questions and not others if that's what they want to do?
Absolutely. That's called a refusal. So they might say, I don't feel comfortable answering that question, or I'm not going to answer that.
All right. So you did a community attitude survey in this case. Did you only look at Lake County?
No.
What counties did you look at?
So we looked at 4 different counties overall. So we looked at Ada County, Bannock County, Canyon County, and Lake County.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about the 3 comparative counties. But for now, can you walk us through your high-level findings for Lake County and Ada County?
Sure. So I think high level, you can see case recognition is very high. And it's also high in Ada County. It's 93% there. it's almost everyone in Latah County, 98%, which is similar to what I saw in the George Floyd case, where it was 99%. So this is extremely high. They're pretty much the same. And it's not just a passing familiarity with the case. It's not that they recognize it but don't know much. You can see people in Latah County reported that they followed the case somewhat or very closely. Almost 70% are closely following this case. And again, that means they're actively looking for information, passively consuming information, talking about it. So it's a big deal in this community. And there's a presumption of guilt. The burden has shifted. So 67% believe Bryan Kohberger is guilty of murder, and 25% reported that he's definitely guilty. So these are strong opinions. And 51% reported what I call a fixed opinion, where they reported that Kohberger would have a difficult time convincing them that he's not guilty. So the burden of proof is shifted on the defendant to prove his innocence. And that's undermines due process. That's not how our system is designed to work. And also on the question of sentence, you can see that 52% believe that he should be sentenced to death.
When I look at this slide and I look at the prejudgment, I'm guilty of murder, and I'm using that term right, prejudgment means somebody's decided before we ever get anywhere near trial that Mr. Kohberger is guilty of murder. When I look at those numbers, it's higher in Ada County. And it's not a secret to anybody in this room that our argument is to move this case to Ada County. Does this seem counterintuitive when I look at the prejudgment rate and it's higher percentage-wise in Ada County?
Yeah, so first of all, in my mind, it's two questions. One is, should the case be moved? Not where, it's should the case be moved? Has the presumption of innocence been undermined based on the reasonable likelihood standard, which is less than the preponderance of the evidence? So the second question is where? In a case like this, you're going to see high case recognition and high prejudgment.
No worries,
everywhere.
Pilola.
They're
Go ahead
essentially the
and
same
lurk
in terms of
away,
67%,
ma'am.
68%.
We
But
like
when you look at case
lurkers.
recognition and size, population size, you'll find that in Ada County, there's about 16 times more people in that county that have not prejudged, if you do the math. So yes, those numbers look the same for those who recognize the case, but there's a much larger swath of people who haven't prejudged. And it's not just prejudgment that matters. So that's one variable you look at, but it's not just that. There's a host of other things. Extent of case knowledge, connections to the case, been exposed to rumors. There's all these other factors that play in. It's not just one item, it's the totality of the findings, not just one question.
When I move to the other slide, what am I seeing on this slide?
So these are instances just to show how invested people in this community are. So almost 80%, 79% have talked about this case online or in person. And that's where information is spread. So even those who may not closely follow the news are learning about it from their neighbors, from their coworkers, from family, from social media, and all of that. So information is being spread through those channels as well. And you do see big differences there when you're looking at Ada County. It's much lower because they're less invested in this case. It wasn't a shocking incident that occurred in their own community. You see that 32% have watched a show, for example, that Netflix or Paramount show or Dateline or something about the case. Almost 40%, 39% personally experienced high levels of stress, anxiety, or fear during the search for the killer while they were here. So that's very high. And then 45% know someone else who has. And if you look at those together, it's actually about 63% have either personally experienced fear or know someone who has during that search. And that shows like the impact they've had on them. And you'll see it later in some of the opens where people talk about, I was scared to walk outside or running to their car from work because they don't feel safe. They can see the house from their office. One person mentions that their wife was scared to go to the supermarket. People talk about they locked their doors for the first time. So it just shows the personal fear and impact this case created in this community that you do not see in large communities.
I have a follow-up question for you on this slide. The statistics that you show us show that the incident of looking at things on social media and Netflix and regular primetime news shows is higher in Latah County. And that's that correlates to the sampling of things you showed us a few moments ago, just your sample of what's out there on social media, on Netflix, and that sort of thing. Is that right? It's higher in Lake County?
It is higher in White County. Now, when you say correlates, like I didn't do a statistical analysis, I would say that's the stuff, the content out there. That's what it looks like if you just do a search, you're following it. And on the anxiety question, that number for Ada County is about 32%. So it's much lower.
Looking at this slide, what does it mean with these differences we're seeing in numbers?
Well, to me, again, it shows personal connection, the personal experience. In a big county, there might be a sensational crime, but you don't see people feeling that way. Because crime is unfortunately frequent, and they might be something else that captures their attention, or there's so much going on. It's not shocking. Here, this is something when people talk about, again, there's an idyllic community where everyone felt safe, and this person took it away from us. It was like shattering this sense of security and safety that we had. And everybody experienced it. And my guess is a lot of people can probably reflect on where they were when they learned this and how it impacted them personally. So it's very unique.
What are we looking at on this slide?
I think you skipped a slide.
It was something Patricia said earlier, I think in the first stream, I'm pretty sure it was Patricia, had said something like that this was such a tragic, horrific case. That's why everybody's heard of it, you know? And I agree with this guy. Like everybody that knows about this case, because of how horrific it was, they remember the details of where they were and when and all of that. This was awful. Absolutely. Don't say horrific. Horrific! Let me say it 3 times because that's how many times she said it. It was horrific. It was horrific. It was horrific. But it definitely was horrific. It was horrific. It was horrific. Yeah, it was definitely bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this one that starts with lived or know someone who would?
Yes.
Okay. So again, this comes back to personal connections. So
She's sitting in the
78%
corner, Margaret.
of survey respondents either lived or know someone who lived in Moscow when the murders occurred, compared to 20% in Ada County. That's not surprising because if you look at the size of Latah County, it's about 32,500 people over the age of 18 compared to about 406,000 in Ada County. And I think it's like 66%
QB.
of Latah County is in.
You coming in hot like that and saying, but definitely not intentional. Dude. That got me. It was not intentional. Look at you just sitting back there all quiet as a little church mouse, and then you pop in with something like that. I am drinking hot coffee, ma'am.
Moscow, so it's a huge percentage. So it's not shocking that people were here or know somebody who was here and heard. And a large number of people are students or employees of the university. It's a quarter of the sample. I ran across one citation where it was like 36%, so it's even higher. Much lower in Ada County. And you can see 40%
What's
of
it
people
mean when your pinky finger itches? Because my pinky finger is itching me to
and
death.
again, if you look at some of the opens, somebody talks about seeing the house from their office window. So it's a constant reminder of this awful thing that happened. These are things, again, that jurors coming into that courtroom will see. It's like, you know, indicators in the community of what impacted them. People may be fearful of, you know, people know they're on the jury and all those things because it's such a small community and people are so invested. And you can see that 22% of the respondents actually work or know someone who
Right, Miss
worked for a law
King? We
enforcement
missed
agency
her.
involved in the investigation. 22%
We don't
compared to
like
just
it
4% in
when
Ada County.
QB's
So
not
again,
here with
direct
us.
connections to this case.
And those
We
direct
don't like it.
connections, those are things that Latah County juror would bring in. Is that right?
Yes, and that's where we see these big differences in national cases like this. This is typically what you see when the entire state is saturated with coverage. Everybody's going to know about it and have opinions to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily have personal connection. That's why cases like the Oklahoma.
I was busy looking at the chat and chit-chatting with you guys, but did you notice on this first page, let me go back. Daggone it, it was way back there, wasn't it? Well, where was that at? Hold on a minute. I don't want to go back that far. Okay, here is where I was looking. Look at this. So you have, these are the key findings on his case, right? And they're looking at the difference between Latah County and Ada County. It's currently in Latah, but they're wanting it in Ada. Read, seen, or heard about the case, 98% Latah County and 93% in Ada. Not that big of a difference, what, like 5%. But then you have down here, follow this case somewhat or very closely. 68% in Latah, 58% in Ada. And then look at this. Believe Bryan Kohberger is guilty of murder. 67% in Latah and 68% in Ada. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I mean, I know that they're taking the grand scheme of the statistics and they have these fancy calculators that tell them which is the best statistical county for him to get a fair trial or whatever. But when you look at this and you see that 1% more in Ada County believe he committed murder, the 68% versus 67, that's enough to tell me I don't want to have it in Ada County. But that's where they want to have it. QB says, all y'all are good for my spirit. She says, I can't believe they're still discussing this, bruh. Everyone and their brother's nephew's mama has heard about this case. I know. It's been everywhere, right? I mean, we got Aussie friends who know about this. We got friends from Canada who know about this. We got friends everywhere who know about this. Miss King agrees. Margaret says, we've had a few trials from San Francisco moved down here in the past. Dudes were still guilty, but they got their change of venue. Well, I mean, I'm not hell-bent on him not having it wherever he wants it. I mean, I don't care where they have it. I've said grand scheme of things like a million times today. That's my favorite phrase for the day. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it matters where he has it. I think the outcome is going to be the same. But in his defense, Devicle's clavicle, I can understand why his attorney is fighting for a change of venue, because even if it's a very tiny chance that it could help him get a not guilty verdict, then of course that's what she's going to do. And I don't blame her. That's Jenny's he's guilty AFAs. He's guilty, in my opinion. Billy says they're just stalling. Well, I mean, really, though, they've already got till the summer of next year. I don't know. Did you see my response to your pinky itching? No, I didn't. What was your... Means you're going to join your own search party. I have to show that. There's a funny little meme I saw today. Cracks me up. Margaret says it needs to be in a little teeny weeny town with a wooden courthouse and lanterns lighting the way, and he'll still be guilty. With no electricity. Yeah, you guys. All right, I'm going to get back to where we were because I rewound it a little bit, to find the 68%. But I bet, QB, she did feel called out. All right, let's get back to this, and then I'm going to go find that meme so I can share it with you guys here in a bit.
People are so invested. And you can see that 22% of the respondents actually work or know someone who work for a law enforcement agency involved in the investigation. 22% compared to just 4% in Ada County. So again, direct connections to this case.
And those direct connections, those are things that Lake County juror would bring in. Is that right?
Yes, and that's where we see these big differences in national cases like this. This is typically what you see when the entire state is saturated with coverage. Everybody's going to know about it and have opinions to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily have personal connection. That's why cases like the Oklahoma City bombing case was moved. I mean, that was a national case. Everybody knew about it, but they still moved it because of the personal connections.
Now advance to the slide. What are we seeing on this slide?
Well, this goes back to case knowledge. So we talked earlier in the day about how case knowledge and it impacts prejudgment and how we have this belief perseverance. So people develop these more complex schema and case knowledge. They're more resistant to change. You can see almost 80% of people in Lake County were familiar with at least 5 of the 9 media items we tested in the survey, almost 80%, and 52% knew 7 out of the 9, or at least 7 of those items. So they have a lot of case knowledge here. It's quite high.
While we're here, I'm talking about the media items. Did you test on every media item you could find?
No.
Did you have to select a certain number so that you could do the survey?
What I do is I read all of the media coverage that is local, those local newspapers, and I'm pulling items that stand out, that are repeated quite a bit. So there's like multiple references to certain things and things that are inadmissible, prejudicial, things that are likely to have create bias and have an impact.
All right. I want to talk a little bit more about how you set up the survey. What are we seeing?
So this should kind of give you an indication of the flow of the survey. So this is the what I call the case recognition question. And it's developed by reading a lot of the coverage and seeing how the case is commonly described in the language in the newspaper, on TV, to construct a case recognition item to try to trigger a memory. So if someone answers yes to this question, question 2A, they then go to the prejudgment question. If somebody answers no, we give them a little more information to see if that triggers a memory. If that does trigger a memory, then they go to the prejudgment question. And if not, they go to the demographic question. So we always have 2 case recognition questions. That's a recommendation, again, in the ASTC professional guidelines. We usually pick up 1% to 2% when we do that in most surveys.
Does this question come after your earlier questions to get them to take your survey, the introduction and information questions?
Yes, it's actually even deeper. So you get the...
I don't really understand why they're going through this again. I mean, they've already talked about this exact questionnaire like months ago. Or am I dreaming?
Introduction. First you get why we're calling, and then you go through screen of questions, and then you're given an instruction about you. There's no right or wrong answers. You can always say, I don't know. I can always refuse. Your answers are anonymous. Then they answer, I think, 3 or 4 general criminal justice questions, and then they get to this question.
When you say the prejudgment question, are you talking about the media items stuff? Is that the same thing you're talking about?
Prejudgment is whether or not you believe a defendant's guilty of whatever the crime is. This is before any of the media items. You would never put those media items and then ask if you think they're guilty, because then you'll create response effects. Like maybe they didn't know that item and you just gave them prejudicial information, and now I think he's guilty because you just told me he confessed or whatever thing it is. Like, we wouldn't want to do that.
Is that why the survey is designed that way?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about some of the survey results. Walk us through what we're seeing here.
Okay, so again, the data suggests that this case has captured the community's attention. This is not a case where people have moved on. Almost everyone in the community recognizes this case. You're at 98% recognition rate. And it's not just a passing familiarity. People are closely following the case. 29% are following it very closely. 39% are following it somewhat closely. So you're basically at 60% closely following this case, which is quite high.
All right, what are we seeing on this slide?
So this is one of the ways we test the validity of our survey. So we talk again, when we talk about the research, we know that people who closely follow the case, people who have a lot of case knowledge, are more likely to believe a defendant is guilty. So one of the things we would expect is to find a similar relationship in our survey, which indicates validity. So, and that's what we find. So whether or not people are closely following this case is significantly related to bias. So if people are following it very closely, within that group, the guilt rate is 84%, and somewhat closely it's 73%. Just kind of looking at it combined, you're at basically 77% of people who are following it somewhat or very closely believe the defendant's guilty of murder. So the more you follow it, the more likely you're to be exposed to prejudicial content, the more likely you are to develop a complex memory and case knowledge, and more likely to have an opinion.
All right, what did you learn about prospective jurors who are talking to each other?
So one is the fact they are talking to each other, and we don't always see that. Sometimes that's 40%, 50%, or even less in terms of talking about a specific case. And you can see here, it's almost everyone. 88% of people who know about the case have talked about it either in person or online. That's quite high. And they're following it, seeing things on social media. They're watching, Netflix episodes or Paramount or whatever was on.
Me, but I'm not a prospective juror because I'm just not. I don't live near there. Thank God.
Shows, they're seeing it in their news feeds. They're closely talking about it. In a small community, that's how information gets spread. It's what we call this informal communication network.
Did you have an opportunity in your survey to learn more about different rumors and things that are going around in Utah County?
I did. So we asked an open-ended question after the prejudgment question, and then it should be what they know about the case and their opinion. And we asked what rumors or theories they've heard in the community to see if they're regurgitating some of the stuff that's been in the newspaper, on social media, the idea, again, of informal communication networks. And smaller communities, you tend to get a lot of like, well, I knew somebody who knew this person, or personal connections, and information gets spread that way. And that's what we saw here. There's a lot of references to things that, the defendant committed a murder in Oregon, like speculation, no evidence of that. It's just something they heard, that he talked about committing the perfect murder on a paper, or that he hates women and he had trouble at the university he goes to with women, and people who worked with him had problems. He stalked her because she didn't respond to him. People were looking at Reddit comments or Reddit posts he had made and from years back, all that kind of stuff. And then references to him, having obsession with some of the victims, ritual animal killings. And these are just a couple examples. Like, you'll see that stuff everywhere, but the amount you see in Utah County is much higher. Like, if you go through comments in Ada County, you'll find some too. You can find examples, and I'm sure if you go to Bannock and Canyon, you're going to see them because the case has gotten so much attention, but not to the degree you have here. And given the size of the community, it's much more significant.
Did you record and document all of these comments in the actual survey report?
Yes.
Okay, and that's something that we provided to the court and the state has no objection, so the court can read the full scope of the rumors from Latah County residents on his own time, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you.
Some fun light reading. Read it.
All right, what did you learn about Latah County residents that were related to Moscow, specific Moscow connections?
Well, this is kind of the unique nature of this too, that I see in cases like natural disasters, like wildfires is a good example where it's this like collective trauma everybody goes through. So you can see 76% of residents here lived or knew someone who lived in Moscow at the time of the murders. So they either are here, the loved one is here, and it creates anxiety, right? So I think it was like almost 40% of students left during Thanksgiving, didn't come back because they were scared for their safety. And you see that in the other questions. So asking about if people experience stress, anxiety, or fear during that search, and you can see 39% reported that they personally did, and another 45% reported that someone they know. And if you look at those, it's called a crosstab, and the question is, did you or someone you know? It jumps up to 63%. So a large percentage of people were anxious and scared about their own personal safety or the safety of someone they know and care about.
Tell me about the open question about people's sense of security. Did people respond to that?
So one of the questions we ask is, how did this crime impact your community? And if I do this in a big county and I ask this, or big venue, federal case, you get a lot of, it didn't, or not much, or, I didn't live near it, so not me, or something like that. You get a lot of that. And I'm sure there's some of that here too. If you look at different venues, Ada County probably has a lot of that, and Bannock. What really stood out to me was this shattering our sense of innocence, right? This is an innocent town, and no crimes or horrible things ever happened here. And this guy took it away from us. We had this idyllic, safe community, and this person destroyed it. This crime destroyed it. And they talk about people, they never locked their cars before, their homes. I think one person said, he didn't even have a house to his key when he bought it, or a key to his house. That makes more sense. And suddenly people are locking doors because they're fearful. People are scared to go to their cars. Again, someone mentioned, you could see the house from their office, and students and staff would run to their car to be safe. People's partners were scared to go to the grocery store. And there were tons of comments about that. This idea that we have this safe community and it's never going to be the same. It's lost. It's like our sense of safety and security, this special place, this tiny little place that's a bubble from all the bad stuff in the world. And then this thing happened.
The comments that you depicted in this slide, is that all of them, or are there others for the court to take a look at?
There's plenty. On top of reading the other stuff, feel free to read all those opens.
Okay. What about the connection to the house where this happened? What did you learn?
Well, I think it comes to this direct and indirect connections to this case, which makes it unique in Latah County, which you don't see everywhere. Is 40% of residents who know about the case, which is pretty much everyone, have either visited the home where the crime occurred or walked by it. And so there is this constant reminder of this awful thing, their daily lives. And also you see a large percentage of people are students or employees at the university, or connected to it, the investigation itself. 22% were connected to the criminal investigation. And then 25% were either students or employees at the university. And we know, if you look at it, the university is a big employer in this community. And when all of these students leave, it has an impact on the economy. Over 60% of the county is made up of people who live in Moscow. And if you look at some of the data, it indicates about 36% of people in this county are either students or employees at the university. So even higher than we saw in the survey.
All right. I want to talk about the prejudgment question. What did you learn?
So this question is one of the indicators of undermining the presumption of innocence. So I look at it, I'm always looking, when I think about due process, is the presumption of innocence. And you see when it shifts to a presumption of guilt. So in this case, 67% of prospective jurors who recognize the case believe Bryan Kohberger is guilty of murder, and 25% have a strong opinion on that. So if you think about it, given the high recognition rate here, if 100 jurors walk into this room during voir dire, 66% of them already think he's guilty before they've heard any evidence.
And that's just the prejudgment question. That's not talking about the other factors that you talked about, media awareness, case connection to the community, things like that.
No, that's just looking at everyone. And if you start looking at things like, well, do they know a lot of detail, that prejudgment jumps up to over 80%. Do they closely follow it? Jumps up to 70%, whatever it is. So that's just looking at the entire sample. You start looking at other things, that prejudgment gets even higher.
You've talked about what you've defined as a fixed opinion or a fixed presumption of guilt. What did you find about that?
Yes, so the question I ask is basically based off, I'm going to start talking subject now. Based off of what you've read, seen, or heard, would the defendant have a difficult time convincing you that he's not guilty? So burden of proof shifting on the defendant. I think I mentioned this last time, but that question was developed by a judge in Tennessee. And what you were seeing was they would ask jurors, well, what do you know about the case? And they would tell them some information or minimize what they know. And then the question was, do you think he's guilty? And maybe they'd say yes. And then they'd say, but I can be fair and impartial. I can set it aside. I think I can do it. And then the follow-up was, well, would he have a difficult time convincing that he's not guilty? And they, oh yeah, I can't change my mind. So it's just much more effective. I find it's more likely to be correlated with these other indicators of bias. So it seems to be more of a valid question. And when I did it, you see basically 51% indicated a strong opinion that would shift the burden of proof onto the defendant. And again, if you look at our analysis of 100 jurors walking in, that would be 50 out of 100 would fall into that category.
They can't change their mind.
Well, I'm sure you can get them to say they can be fair because I see it all the time. But this doesn't mean they can't. We heard a lot about that earlier today. Yeah.
All right. And did you ask similar questions, prejudgment for guilt, I guess prejudgment for the sentence?
Yeah. So because this is a capital case, I did ask whether or not which sentence do they believe the jury should select if he's convicted. And you can see 52% reported that he should get the death penalty based off of what they've read, seen, or heard, whereas just 23.5 or 24% reported that he should get life.
Did you ask a fixed question about the penalty?
Yeah, so I asked the same fixed opinion question, and you find that 51% believe that the sentence should be death and that he couldn't convince them that it should be life. Only 19% reported that the defendant would not have a difficult time convincing them that he should get a life sentence.
This is a small community. What did you learn about the impact of this case on this small community and the pressure of a juror in Utah County to convict? So
one of the things I wanted to look at, because it's a small community and people know everyone, and the pressure when we're coming in and out of this courthouse on a day-to-day basis, when it's been inundated with journalists, and my guess is people can figure out who's on the jury by who's not picking their kids up at school and talking to neighbors and all that. Is there pressure? Do the jurors ever feel pressure like there has to be a certain outcome? How would the community react if he's not convicted, if he's found not guilty? And there was quite a bit of strong comments and on a range of themes, from people would basically kill him to they burn the courthouse down or assume that the jury failed, or that he would have to prove that he was not guilty. Again, shifting the burden. So it's like, I can't imagine that happening because they have so much evidence against him. We would be dumbfounded. Like, how could he not be guilty given the amount of evidence? Several would be on the hunt for him to make sure he gets what's coming to him. And then just emotional stuff about it would be devastating to the community. Other people talked about the fear if he didn't do it, well, who did? Like, that means this person's still among us, who creates the same stress and fear and anxiety that people had before. So this community needs closure. And you have to imagine what that's like for a jury from months on end, in and out of this courtroom in this tiny community, and trying to explain to their neighbors, what they did and why. And that shifts the burden again back onto the defendants.
The comments that you've captured in this PowerPoint slide, is this all?
Yeah, these are just a few examples.
Plenty more for the court to read?
Yeah.
Did you ask these open questions in the comparative counties too?
Yes, it's the same question as in all the counties.
Were the other counties as high of rate in these kinds of answers? Did they have a similar kind of answer as Latah County potential jurors did?
No. And now you can read through it and you will find answers that people would be angry and upset because you're talking to hundreds of people and you're going to get those. But they're much less strong. They're much more, no opinion. They wouldn't have an effect, things like that you see in other places. Very few people in Latah County have that.
All right. I think we have a couple of slides on the questions that were in the survey. I think we know those.
Yes. So these are our case recognition questions, we call them, or I call them recognition items, I guess. So we do ask an open-ended question. What have you read, seen, or heard about the case? We'll get into that, but that's the typical question you ask in jury selection. And people answer that, but they often use minimization language or unable to recall everything from it. So we ask later on these case recognition items to see if they're familiar with widely reported.
Oh, hey, Patricia, I didn't see your question, honey. I think that they're about 300 miles apart. She says, I would imagine everyone in that immediate area was terrified and paying attention. And as time went on and no one was arrested, people far reaching were worried. Right. Yep. And paying attention to the case. Yeah. Pilola says, I'm sure everything in those communities changed. It's really scary to think, you send your college kids out into the world to live college life, right? And then so I would imagine everybody in the area was scared, but but to be fair though, I think a lot of these kids were going home for the holidays. I think this happened in November. Let me see. Yeah, November 13th. So a lot of them would have been preparing to go home for, Thanksgiving, or I don't know when their fall breaks are or how, I don't know, but are they going to poll Ada County if it gets approved to move there? Because if they're going to keep doing this, then they're going to wind up in some tiny town in Appalachia. I know, right? You're not kidding.
Media items. And if you look at the professional guidelines, this is what's recommended. So we first ask an open-ended question, and then later we follow up with these closed-ended questions.
What did you learn when you did that in the?
I remember whenever they were in the Daybell trial, I think it was the Daybell, but I don't remember if it was Lori or Chad. But they had said something about they wanted it in wherever, I can't remember now, what county, because they said that the vast majority of people in that county are farmers and older generations, so they don't spend a lot of time on social media. A lot of the older folks aren't into true crime like Some people are, so I think that they thought that they would have a better shot there. Maybe that's what they're thinking, and maybe that's what is going on in Ada County. Maybe Ada County is I don't know. I have no idea. But I don't think it is though, because I think isn't Ada County where Boise is located? I don't know.
A survey with Lee Tucker.
So I'm not going to go through all of them, but we learned that people are familiar with many items that have been widely reported in the media. And you don't always see that. Sometimes case recognition is high, but people don't know a lot of detail. Maybe they know a few items or recognition rates are 40, 50%. But what we found here are people have well-developed attitudes and opinions that recall a lot of prejudicial content. So in Latah County, you can see that 79% were familiar with at least 5 of the 9 media items, and 52% knew 7 or more of the media items that we tested, over half.
And you tested on 9, is that right? 9.
Yeah, up to 9.
And I think you mentioned, but I think your chart's going to explain to me why more media items, more media recognition items correlate with the prejudgment question of guilt.
Yeah, and this goes back to validity of the survey, right? We know from earlier research that case knowledge is correlated with prejudgment, and that's exactly what we found. So the more people know, the more case knowledge, the stronger their opinions, the more likely they are to have developed a perception of guilt. So people who were familiar with 5 or 6 items, you can see it's 66% guilt rate, and for 7, it's 82%. So jumps up quite a bit. So the more case knowledge you have, the more likely you are to believe guilty. And you see the same thing with that, I call it that fixed opinion question. That's significantly related to case knowledge as well. So the number of people who said that he would have a difficult time changing their mind is essentially 66%. If they know 7 or more items.
Let's talk about the specific items that were known, just a few of them. We won't go through all of them. What did you learn?
So these are just going through a few that we tested, and you can see high recognition rates and significantly related to prejudgment. So whether or not people know that a knife sheath was found on the bed next to one of the victims, 81% of survey respondents in Latah County knew that detail. And you can see it's significantly related to bias. So if you knew that, 72% of people who knew that item believe he's guilty, and 55% reported that he would have a difficult time convincing them otherwise.
What about another media item?
What about what?
Another media item?
Thank you.
So the next one is whether or not they knew that DNA was found on the knife sheath, that there was a match for the defendant. And you can see that 67% know that detail. And if you know it, it's highly prejudicial. So 75% of people who know that item believe that he's guilty, and 60% reported a fixed opinion.
How about a vehicle recording?
So this one, whether or not Bryan Kohberger owns the same type of car recorded on the video driving in the neighborhood where the killings occurred. This was a widely reported media item. So 86% of people know that detail. And 82% of those who do know that believe he's guilty. Quite high.
How about the cell phone tower media item?
So on that one, you see a case recognition rate or item recognition rate of 79%. 79% of survey respondents knew that detail. And if you knew that, 72% of them believe that the defendant's guilty.
How about the media item studies?
So this would go down to like a misinformation, I'll call it an inaccurate detail that was widely reported, that the defendant had stalked one of the victims. And you can see recognition rate currently at 45% when the survey was done. And 81% of people who knew that detail reported that guilty.
How about following on social media?
I believe this is the last one. You can see whether or not he was essentially following them on social media. 45% recognition rate, and 79% of those who know that believe he's guilty. And these are all statistically significant findings.
Let's talk about some of the comparative counties that that you surveyed, and if you can give me a high level of your key findings in those counties.
Sure. So now, in my mind, this shows significant bias, that there's a reasonable likelihood that the due process has been undermined in the sense that there's a presumption of guilt in this county. And the question is, if you were to move it, where would you move it? That's question 2.
We're on to the second part.
We're on to the second part now. That's where this comes. So you'll see recognition rates are high in these 3 counties we tested. So we tested Ada County because it's the biggest county in the state. It's about 406,000 people over the age of 18, and other high-profile cases have been moved there before in recently. Canyon County we picked because I believe it's the 2nd largest county, and it is also near Ada County. So it's a big county. We picked that, and we picked Bannock County because it's just far away. And it had less media coverage. So we wanted to see if there was a possibility that people would have less case knowledge there. And you can see recognition rates vary from 90% to, from 84% to 93% across those 3 cases.
Margaret,
And
can
you
Steph
can
come
see
back?
that in terms of how closely they followed it is less than we saw in Latah County. So Ada is 58, Canyon is 51, and Bannock is 46. Compared to Latah County, remember, it was 68%, much higher. The guilt rates are essentially the same, or it's a little higher in Bannock County, but because of the population size, there's a big difference. So again, you'll find about 16 times more people in Ada County who have not prejudged compared to here. And then similar in terms of the strength of opinion and difficulty in convincing them that he's not guilty, similar to what you see here, and sentence similar as well. So you're in the 49 to 57%. So these numbers are also high.
Where do you start to see differences that matter?
You start to see differences when you talk about personal connection. That's where the big differences come up. So remember we said that 79% of people in Ada County had talked about this case. Might be wrong, might have been higher. It's just 60% in Ada County, 50% in Canyon, and 51% in Bannock, so it's much lower. You'll see whether or not they've experienced high levels of stress. In Ada County, it's just 17%, and the other 2 counties, it's only 11%. It was 39% in the county here. And then whether or not they know someone who experienced higher levels of stress, we had 45% here. Here we're down to 24, 19, and 19. So you see big differences there in terms of the community connection, the personal connection for the case.
What about the connections to Moscow that are unique to this area?
Yes, so just 20% in Ada County know someone who lived in Moscow, 15% in Canyon, and 16% in Bannock, 78% in Latah County. Whether or not they were a student or employee in Latah County, that was 25%, and we're looking at 4% and 3%, much lower. Whether they visited the home or saw it, Latah County is 40%. Here we're down to 8%, 3%, 2%, much lower. Whether or not they knew someone who actually was involved in the investigation, in Latah County, that number was 22%, I believe. And in Ada County, it's just 4, Canyon, it's 2, Bannock is 2. So much lower when it comes to those type of connections, the personal connection, personal investment in the case.
What about the recognition of media items?
Yeah, so we had, I think it was 79% in Latah County knew at least 5 of those media items, and it drops to 65% in Ada, 52% in Canyon, 59% in Bannock. If they knew 7 or more, that was 52% in Latah County. It's just 42% in Ada, 27% in Canyon, and 29% in Bannock. So less case knowledge. And we know case knowledge comes back to belief perseverance, right? So the more you know, the more resistant your attitudes are to change, the more likely you are to attend to and process information consistent with what we know. New information about the DNA evidence, I already know about that. That's credible, I give that weight. So you're much more likely to see that in Latah County. Be careful.
All right. I think you told us a little bit about the population size. And is that why you selected Ada was the population size?
So I'm not selecting anything. I'm just pointing out some possibilities. So I selected Ada County in terms of to do the survey because it's the largest county in the state. And, it was a Dalo case was moved there. So you know that they can take this case in. We know large counties, it's less of a big deal when the case moves there. It doesn't become the biggest story in that community. So I wanted to test Lake County. Pick Canyon because it's the second largest county, over 184,000 people. And then I picked Bannock because it's further away. It's quite far away, hundreds of miles from here, and it's in a different media zone. It does have some of the similarities of Latah County. So for example, there's a university there that's the second largest employer. So there's a risk there. About 18% of the population is connected to that university. So there are those risks. And I think the problem there, while some of the numbers are good, are it'll become a huge deal if that case is moved there. You're gonna have the media circus move from here to there, and it's gonna become, again, a huge story in that community. So there is risk if you choose a smaller venue that something like that will happen.
And that risk is tied specifically to the size of Bannock County?
Yes, smaller counties, you don't have stories like this regularly happening. So it's more likely to become a big deal in that county. And you could end up with significant bias between the time the case is moved and the time it goes to trial, because there might be an increase in media coverage there.
When we talk about the survey itself, was it only people who knew about the case that took the survey?
No. Explain to me what you mean by that.
Well, I'm looking at your slide here about people who, whether or not they know about the case, do they finish the survey? I think one of the things the state's criticized about is a non-response bias. So I want to understand if you can tell us that about how the survey works, this one and others.
Right. So first of all, one thing we do is we do comparison surveys in a host of different cases. So if you look at other cases we've
Morgana
done this
says you
on,
can come
if that were
back,
true,
Steph.
you would find that only people who know about the case take the survey in the comparison.
Margaret's stuck under the fridge again.
So you can see in Renfro, this was an Idaho case, in Kootenai County, 89% of survey respondents recognized the case that took the survey, that completed it. In Ada County, 67% of the people that completed the survey did not know about the case. So you would expect you wouldn't see that trend if people just say, oh, I don't know about this, I'm not going to take the survey, I have no opinion. In state of Tennessee, v. Andrew Delkey, similar findings. So in Davidson County, 67% of the people who completed the survey knew about the case. In Hamilton County, 84% of people who completed the survey did not know anything about the case. In United States v. James Cloud, which was in Washington, you can look at, we did 3 venues, and in Yakima, 55% of the people that completed the survey knew about the case. In Richland, 82% did not know about the case. In Spokane, 90% did not know about the case. What's unique and why you see high recognition rates across the surveys here is because it's a national case. And when we have national cases, you see high recognition rates all over. So this last one, the state of Minnesota, the Alexander King, was the George Floyd case. And you can see high recognition rates in all the counties, just like we see here. The reason is because there's a lot of media exposure everywhere. But it's not that people are hanging up because they don't want to take the survey. In fact, if you look at the call data, after they were told the case recognition question and described the case, only one person hung up out of the 1,200 people that completed the survey. And one person who terminated the survey after being told what the survey was about. Everyone else.
All 4 counties?
All 4 counties, one person.
That's all right. We have talked quite a bit about the bias and the prejudicial media coverage and the difficulty, the impossibility that will happen seating a jury in Latah County. I want to talk a little bit about jury selection in cases that have a lot of publicity. Are you familiar with that?
Sure, yes.
All right. Why should we talk about this now? Why do we not want to just wait and try to pick a jury first?
Well, I think first of all, I've done a lot of jury selections. I'm sure you have, Your Honor, you have, I'm sure you all have. So we all know how the jury selection process works. So in a normal case, people do not have case-specific attitudes. And we know specific attitudes are predictive of behavior. So I might just have a general passing attitude towards something. I mentioned DUI or it's like a contract dispute. Like you can ask me questions. I don't have strong opinions. I don't know anything about the case. So they're not specific attitudes. So jury selection is effective in that scenario. It's fine. But when people have case-specific attitudes and case-specific knowledge, and I've heard information and evidence, even if it's coming into trial, I heard it in the context of a news story. There's no rules of evidence that were applied. There was no cross-examination. There was no counter expert to refute what was said. It was just said by a public, speaker. He was on an editorial on a television station on Nancy Grace. So it's very different. And then when I hear it as evidence, it's just confirming what I already know. It's not new, not processing it for the first time. So that's one of the big problems. So why you need to identify people that have that content and information. And there's challenges because of the way memory works. Recall is limited, and we'll get to that. But when you ask people, what do you know about the case? They are not able to give a full account of everything they know. So it's very hard to assess what people know, which makes it very difficult to exercise cause challenges and preparatory challenges. And the other thing is just the nature of jury selection. It's very easy to rehabilitate a juror to get them to say they can be fair. It happens all the time. So a juror says that I had this experience, or I think I'm leaning towards one side, and it's so easy, we do it all the time, to get a socially desirable response. You start with, well, the law requires everyone to be fair, everybody has their own opinions, and that's okay. We're just asking you, can you follow the law? Can you follow the instructions? Can you deliberate? Can you be fair? And most people will say yes to that because they want to create a socially desirable response. They know what the right answer is. Give leading questions. In one study, they actually analyzed a transcript, or 3 trials transcripts, and it was like 60% of the comments during voir dire were from attorneys and judges. Just 40% were from jurors, and 63% of the comments from jurors were one-word answers. And I see that in the post-conviction stuff I do when I analyze transcripts. It's 3 pages of indoctrination into what a juror is supposed to do, ending with a closed-ended answer, can you set it aside? That's not an indicator of what their ability to do. People can't just men in black flash heaping themselves and forget everything. It doesn't work that way.
I think we may have covered voir dire and honest disclosure with that, and I didn't advance the slide. Can you give us a case example or an example of this?
Sure. So this is an example of stealth juror. So a case like this, you're a stealth juror, there's a likelihood that people want to be on this case, right? It's a high profile case. It's going to be on TV. It's going to get a lot of attention. There might be a desire to seek justice and you want to be involved in that. Well, how do you identify jurors like that? So this is an example case I worked on where it was a long time ago. It was in LA. There was this division in the police department called the Rampart Division, Rampart. And basically there were a number of corrupt police officers who were stealing drugs out of the evidence locker, shooting suspects and planting guns on them. It was these rogue police officers. And one of the people, his last name was Ovando, he had been shot by a police officer, this guy Perez, who then planted a gun on him and alleged that Ovando had shot at him. So he was convicted of attempted murder. He was paralyzed from the waist down. And then Perez got caught stealing drugs out of a locker room. So he confessed to all these things, and Ovando was released. He got like a $20 million settlement against LA County. Then he sued the public defender, claiming that, they should have figured this whole thing out and known that, there was a scandal and so on. And it won like $6 million in that case. And then later, when they looked, it turned out that one of the jurors on that case had been in a movie about the incident called Gang Wars. And when they were asked, has anybody have a connection to the case? She didn't raise her hand. But during the deliberations, she talked about stuff she knew. She talked about stuff that didn't come into trial, and it resulted in a mistrial. So that's just one example. There's other examples as well. But yeah, so that's one challenge you have in a case like that.
All right, recall and recognition. I think you're going to talk to us about how hard it is to ferret out what somebody knows.
So to me, this is one of the biggest challenges in high profile cases. So the question you ask on a juror questionnaire and an open voir dire is, what have you read, seen, or heard about this case? That's the open-ended question you ask. That is what we call a recall question. And the cognitive task is, on the spot, I need to search my memory and see what's accessible and salient and what I can remember on the spot. And I'll tell you. And then you it's usually followed up with, can you be fair and impartial? And what we find is people are not able to recall everything they know. And that information that they forgot to mention comes up later. So the common example is, tell me everything you know about a movie. Maybe go with Star Wars. And you probably will tell me a lot because a lot of people have seen that movie or seen it a bunch of times. But if I asked you follow-up closed-ended questions, you'd find that you forgot to mention a whole bunch of things. Like maybe you didn't mention that Luke Skywalker was Darth Vader's son, right? And it was, do you remember that? Oh, of course I know that. I just forgot to mention it. So you see things like that. So the tricky thing is you can't ask people, have you read, seen, or heard if the defendant was stalking one of the victims? Because now you're poisoning the well. What if they didn't mention that and they're open-ended? Doesn't mean they don't know it, because we know about 45% of the population here does know it. So you're in that position where you are trying to make an assessment if this juror can truly be fair and impartial without knowing what this juror actually knows about the case. And that's one of the biggest problems you have in high-profile cases that are not a problem in your run-of-the-mill typical case.
Have you seen that bear itself out in a real case?
I have. This was a case in Texas where we actually had community members come in during the venue hearing and treated them like mock jurors in a sense and asked them what they knew about the case, and they told us. It was a big case at the time in Hidalgo County in Texas, and people told us what they knew, and then we asked, is that everything you know? And they'd say, yes, that's it. And because it's not real jury selection, we had the opportunity to demonstrate this whole problem. And we would say things like, well, did you know that he allegedly confessed? And then it would stimulate a memory, and the person would say, oh yeah, I did know that. He actually confessed twice at a monastery. So it triggered a memory. And then it was, well, is that everything else you know? Do you know anything else? And they'd say, no, that's it. And say, well, did you ever hear that he had committed another crime? And they say, oh yeah, that's right. He actually attacked another girl at a different church in a nearby town. And it was, well, is that everything you know? Take your time, search your memory. And that's it. And then we do it again. And it was, well, did you know there was a cover up? Oh yeah, the Catholic Church covered it up and the police department. And it just demonstrated the problem. Now, that was fine in that little demonstration we did, but you could never do that in jury selection, because if you did that, you just poison that juror. If they don't know it, you just poison them. If they did know it, then you have to get rid of them, right? So you're in this impossible position in terms of trying to figure out if this juror can be truly fair and impartial when you don't know what they know.
Do we have a glimpse of how that works in Bryan Kohberger's case based on the search warrant?
We do.
All right. How do we know? Tell me about that.
So we always use the open-ended question. What have you read, seen, or heard about the case, and code it. And what we found is, on average, people reported 1.6 details when asked that open-ended question. So we know that's the average number of details they report. And then we compare that to the closed-ended questions later, those 9 media items, to see if there's additional items that they actually recognized that they failed to mention in the open. And what we found in this case was that 96% of survey respondents knew at least one of these media items that they failed to mention in the open. And on average, they recognized an additional 4.9 media items. So almost 5 out of the 9 failed to mention. And these are just some examples. So, someone said, what have you read, seen, or heard about this case? Just what has been on the TV and the papers. So that
Tested about how many recognized an item that hadn't reported.
Rawr, I hate when they do that. Oh my God. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
First case based on the search warrant.
So I mean, I'm just guessing where we're at here. So I mean, I think that this is close to where we were. Yeah. I remember seeing this part. Okay, let's start back right here.
Percent of survey respondents knew at least one of these media items that they failed to mention in the open, and on average, they recognized an additional 4.9 media items. So almost 5 out of the 9 failed to mention. And these are just some examples. So, someone said, what have you guys seen or heard about this case? Just what has been on the TV and the papers. So that's minimization language. They use the word just. There's no specific detail. But later when we ask those closed-ended questions, that person knew all 9 of them. Another one is just what I've read and seen on the news and newspapers. Again, knew all 9. Read articles about the case, knew 8 of the 9. Just what I read in the papers, same as everyone else, 7 of the 9. So these are just a few examples, but this is what happens. This is what you see on juror questionnaires. This is what you see in voir dire. And I mentioned that, anyways, yeah.
And that's dangerous in this case because of the amount of prejudicial media coverage. Is that right?
It's dangerous in this case and in high profile cases. That's the unique problem they create. What's unusual in this one is, 1, it's in a small community, and 2, people here have very well developed schema and attitudes and case knowledge.
I think you have some specific examples of some of the media items tested about how many recognized an item that hadn't reported.
Yeah, so just to give it two examples to make the point. So this is the one we talked about, whether or not the defendant stalked one of the victims. Prejudicial, 45% of survey respondents recognize this item when we ask, have you read, seen, or heard it? But when we ask them the open-ended question, what have you read, seen, or heard about this case? Only 3% mentioned it on their own. So 3% of people reported this item, but 45% actually recognize it later on. And we know it's not only is it not true, but it's also prejudicial because 81% of people that know it have already judged the defendant as guilty. So it's really important to know who are the people in this panel that know that detail. So your choice is to just assume no one knows it because they didn't spontaneously mention it, or poison the well by asking the juror specifically, did you know that Bryan Kohberger allegedly stalked the victim? So that's a difficult position to be in.
Let's look at one more example of how that worked.
So this is the one about the knife sheath, whether or not police found a knife sheath on the bed. So you probably want to know that. Well, 81% of people recognize that item later, but only 8% mentioned it when asked the open-ended question. So again, just demonstrating the problem. These are items that are correlated with bias. We know that there's a high rate of recognition in the community, but when you ask in jury selection, what have you read, seen, or heard about the case? Very few people mention it. This is what you see.
All right. The magic question, can you set it aside and be fair and impartial? Is that going to work?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Is this going to work? This question.
Yeah. So you want to, what is this a good question, bad question?
Will it work? Will it help
Will it
us?
work? What does work mean? I don't know if you think about that.
Help us find an impartial jury.
No, there's no data to suggest that this is a valid question. And just touching on the research again, what you would expect is people that know a lot about the case or been exposed to prejudicial pretrial publicity would be more likely to say they cannot be fair and impartial compared to people that do not know a lot about the case. And there's no significant relationship. People who know a lot of detail and have been exposed to prejudicial pretrial publicity are just as likely to say they can be fair and impartial as people who have not. So there's no data to support that.
And do you have an example to tell us about?
So this is some research I did on this question to see how people respond to it. And so what I did was I went to a Facebook page that was about this documentary on HBO that got a lot of attention called The Jinx. The Jinx was about a person named Robert Durst, who had been a suspect for multiple murders for his wife. He went to trial in Texas for murder, and then a good friend of his in California was killed, and he was suspected to be involved in that as well. What was unique, he was from a very wealthy family in New York, so it captured a lot of people's attention. And there was this mini series on HBO, and at the end of it, they confront him with some evidence that would suggest he was involved with his friend Susan's murder. And he takes a break and he goes into the bathroom and he forgot that he was wearing a microphone, and he pretty much confesses. He says, "Of course I shot them all," or "Of course I killed them all." He's talking to himself. So it was a highly prejudicial documentary. And later on, he was charged with the murder of his friend. So what we did was we went to this Facebook page where people had made public statements about the defendant that were highly prejudicial. So this is just one example. Someone said, "This is a true version or vision of a sociopath. I'm physically ill over the conclusion. I'm beside myself. I was overjoyed at the news that he was arrested." So if somebody said this in public about this case, I think we all agree that person probably can't be fair. You're publicly stating it to the world. You think he's a sociopath. So we recruited people that made these extreme comments on this page and went through a survey. And we asked if they knew about the case, whether they thought he was guilty, what they knew, and so on. You can see, as you'd expect, almost everybody we recruited who made these public statements reported that Robert Durst was guilty of murder, 92%. And reported strong opinion. 77% of the people we recruited said that he could not change their mind about his guilt. So almost everyone. And then we asked those closed-ended case recognition questions, and many of these are either inadmissible or very prejudicial. That he was like a suspect in his wife's disappearance. Probably not admissible in a different case. His murder trial in Texas. We asked several of these, and the confession, the captured confession, because he 100% knew that, which is considered like the most prejudicial thing that can be in the media, according to the Supreme Court. And so what we expect is that these people.
Okay, I pumped it up to 1.25 speed because it looks like it's got about 15 minutes left, and it's 6:20 on the East Coast, and I gotta get kiddo ready for bed soon, so we're gonna scooch on through. Well, we gotta do dinner and then bedtime stuff, so yeah.
People would say, "I cannot be fair and impartial." There's so much bias that they're demonstrating. So we give them the magic instruction that you often see. This came from a transcript in a high-profile case where the court had explained the burden of proof and that the defendant's entitled to a fair and impartial trial, and that the law requires that you set aside everything you know and only rely on the evidence. Common things you hear. And all these people who express all this public bias and all this vitriol and reported that he's guilty and you can't change your mind, by just saying that to them, magically report that they can be fair and impartial. 81% said they could be fair and impartial after hearing that instruction. And they gave open-ended responses as to why. And so this is our participant who mentioned that they were overjoyed by his arrest and they were physically ill, and that Robert Durst was a sociopath. Well, they, on a scale of yes, definitely to no, definitely not, they reported that they could definitely be fair and impartial. And they reported that I could start from the beginning and listen to all the information presented and follow the directions and wipe out everything that I know. I would need to be convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt. So that answer, if you see in a courtroom without knowing that this person was making public statements about the defendant being a sociopath, probably considered rehabilitated as a fair and impartial juror, which demonstrates like a person like that should be answering that question no, but they don't. And even kind of going back to the Rideau case, which was recorded confession in the police station with the chief of police on one side and officers on the next, played in the media with music on it. It was highly prejudicial in a small town, and the Supreme Court ruled that threw out the conviction because of it. All the jurors in that case who saw that confession reported that they could be fair and impartial. They all sat on that trial. They all reported that they could be fair, and the Supreme Court didn't take that at face value because the content of the coverage was so prejudicial.
All right. Based on your years of experience, your education, all of the work that you do in general, and then specifically the work that you've done in this case, the survey, the hundreds of comments, do you have an opinion about this case and whether you can seat an impartial jury in Lake County?
I did.
What is your opinion?
So my opinion, again, is based on whether or not there's a reasonable likelihood of using that standard, which is less than the preponderance of the evidence. Lake County is a small venue, and the crime has been seared in the community's consciousness. People have been saturated with prejudicial coverage. Many people here have direct and indirect connections to this crime. People here demonstrate that they experience fear and stress, panic in this community. There's significant rumors and misinformation that have been spread and people have been exposed to in this community. There's a feeling of pressure to convict. I think given the reaction that people think the community would have if he's acquitted, that's particularly concerning. We know from the data that jurors have closely followed the case, they've talked about it, they're familiar with prejudicial details. I think that the presumption of innocence has been undermined and presumption of guilt prevails in this community. And I think the pre-existing attitudes and opinions will influence how people process evidence. So even if the same information is presented at trial, there's a big difference in terms of jurors being exposed to that for the first time. I don't know about the DNA evidence. I don't know about the videos versus a juror being exposed to something that they already know, where they're just confirming what they already know. I already know about the DNA evidence. It's just triggering a memory of what I already recall. And I'm processing this information through that filter that is consistent with what I believe and I already know. And it impacts how they see government witnesses and how they will view and evaluate defense witnesses. And I don't think voir dire is an effective remedy, given the research I've done, my experience doing jury selections, and the nature of how memory works. So taking all that combined, I think it's appropriate to change that.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, Your Honor. And Dr. Edelman, hang tight if you stay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. So this would be a good time to take a break.
Sure.
And we'll come back at 3:20. Thank you. Dr. Beck.
Okay, so they're taking a break. He said they would be back at 3:20, which is 6:20, which was 5 minutes ago, and they're not back yet. So, come on, judge. But I agree, Miss King. He does. I mean, I know that a lot of these hearings are going to be long anyway, you know. So, I mean, if the trial is going to be 3 months long, the hearings are going to be long. Right, Patricia. Not very timely. No wonder it's going to take 3 months. They're back.
All right. Mr. Edelman, it's all sneezed already. All right, so we're now back on the record. This is State versus Kohberger, case number CR 29222805. Kohberger is still in the courtroom along with counsel and also counsel for the state. And Mr. Edelman is ready for cross-examination, I believe, and you're still on your oath. So go ahead.
And actually, Your Honor, the state has everything it needs from Dr. Edelman, so we won't be doing any cross.
Oh, okay. May this witness be excused.
You may, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You're free to stay, free to leave. Thank you. Appreciate for you being here.
Thank you, State.
Okay, another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Our last witness is Dr. Dare.
Good Lord.
Dare. Okay, I thought maybe Dr. Dare was going to be rebuttal to the state. No?
Your Honor, we disclosed Dr. Dare twofold. First, to talk to the court about the survey instrument itself, and then to provide rebuttal testimony. Part of that is going to come based on the state's objection too. So I don't know if the state has any witnesses to call, but we'd ask that she stay for that if that's the case.
Okay. So Dr. Dare, line it up. Please face court. Raise your hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Please have a seat, and then once you're seated, please state your name and spell your last.
Yes, Veronica Dare, D-A-H-I-R.
Thank
I would have
you.
never spelled it that way.
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon. All right, let's start with your occupation. What do you do?
I am the director of the Grant Sawyer Center for Justice Studies at the University of Nevada, Reno. I'm also the director of survey operations for the Nevada Center for Surveys, Evaluation, and Statistics, also at the University of Nevada, Reno.
Do you also do consultations outside of your role with the university?
Yes, occasionally.
And is it in that capacity that you're here today?
No, today I'm here independent of my role at the University of Nevada, Reno. I am here as an expert consultant, and that is independent of my work at the university, although my testimony is based on my previous experience, knowledge, and education that I received at the university.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about what you do for work, but let me back up and find out about your educational background.
I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's and PhD in interdisciplinary social psychology from the University of Nevada, Reno. My master's and PhD are from the University of Nevada, Reno. In terms of my work at the university, I have a joint appointment, as I mentioned. I run two different research centers at the university. One, as I mentioned, is the Grant Sawyer Center for Justice Studies, and the other one is the Survey Lab. I also teach in the Judicial Studies program. I teach a graduate level course called Scientific Research Methods for Judges, which is a course for judges getting their PhD across the nation. They're sitting judges that are on the bench. I teach another course called Scientific Methods for the Justice Management Program, which is a master's degree program at the
Yeah, that's
university.
funny.
I have taught
That's
social
cute, Gail.
psychology, criminal justice research methods. I've taught other courses, but that was quite a while ago right now.
Veronica. I think she said her name was Veronica. Veronica Dare. Dare me. Whoppa. All right.
I'm just teaching this graduate level course. I serve on several dissertation committees for various departments on campus: social psychology, psychology, School of Public Health, computer science, natural sciences. There's many. I serve as a dissertation advisor and committee member for students that are getting their degrees, and primarily in the Judicial Studies program. I have served as an advisor and as well as the social psychology program on campus. In terms of my role on campus, I do primarily, let's take the Sawyer Center first. We do research on justice-related topics broadly defined. My background is social psychology with an emphasis in justice studies and law. And so our research that we've been doing there is specifically related to research in the justice system. We have many different populations that we research and do surveys with, including jurors, judges, attorneys, both defense and prosecution, court reporters. We've done many surveys on diverse populations as well, including people experiencing homelessness, LGBTQIA populations, the elderly, prisoners, inmates, Native American populations. So we've done many, many surveys in that capacity. In my role as the survey director for the Center for Surveys, Evaluation, Statistics, I am in charge of multiple research projects that have to do with surveys nationally, regionally, and locally. Most predominantly, The one that we have been doing since I've been there in 2006 is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, otherwise known as the CDC, their BRFSS survey, which stands for Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. I am the project coordinator for Nevada, and I've been doing that role since 2000 for the state of Nevada for the last 3 years. But before that, I was the data collection supervisor for this project since 2006. So I've been working on that project for quite a while. Prior to my role in both of these programs, I also worked on surveys. I've been doing, I would say, surveys and research for almost 30 years. Since I've been a graduate student and even before that. So not before graduate student, well, I did research, but before my role in this area, I did research. Most predominantly for the Sawyer Center, we did a nationwide survey on Daubert, and it entailed 400 randomly sampled judges across the nation. And we looked at the effect of Daubert on judicial decision-making. In both of my roles, I work with many organizations to do surveys. We do work for, besides the CDC that I mentioned, many state agencies, Nevada Department of Transportation, Department of Training and Department of Employment, Training and Rehabilitation. I won't do all the acronyms. I won't do that to you, so because I can shoot off all the acronyms, but we work with the National Judicial College. They're right on campus. I'm in the building, actually. National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. We've worked on projects with the Federal Judicial Center, the State Justice Institute, and many more organizations. I know you're going to ask me other questions, but I wanted to get those out. So
I do have a couple of questions for you. You said 30 years about of your life you've spent doing this work.
yes,
And it sounds like it has a whole lot to do with survey work.
yes,
Is that both designing surveys and then critiquing surveys?
yes. So we have done numerous projects, as I mentioned. You're probably going to ask me, so I'll just say it. We have published in academic journals. I personally have published on different aspects of survey research in Judicature, Justice System Journal, Future of Evidence by the American Bar Association. I have a chapter in there. That one's not specific to surveys, sorry. I have other publications, but specific to surveys, Survey Practice Journal, Law and Human Behavior on the judge survey that we had done. There are numerous. I don't know if I can remember them all right now.
No,
But
Sherry, right?
and in terms of technical reports, we do a lot of technical reports for our projects. And those are
Morgana.
basically
I know, Morgana.
reports
I
of
can't quit
findings
yawning.
that we give to our clients specifically.
I'm literally like,
To use for their organizations based on whatever topic it is that they want us to survey or study. So I mentioned some of them before. We DETR, which is Department of Employment, Training and Rehabilitation, Nevada Department of Transportation, Nevada Department of Corrections. I don't think I mentioned that one. And we've done 140 over my career there, 140 technical reports, all of which in some way or fashion have related to surveys or survey research. We do a lot of evaluation projects, needs assessments, and most of those always entail a survey of some kind.
Are there guidelines or standards that govern survey work?
Yes, ones that have been mentioned here already, APOR, the American Association of Public Opinion Research, and specifically for change of venue surveys or community attitude surveys, ASTC, which is the American Society of Trial Consulting.
Are you familiar with the standards of both?
Yes, I'm a member of both organizations.
Okay. I want to know why people do surveys. It sounds like you've had a hand in a lot of surveys over the years. Why do people do surveys?
Many different reasons to find out information about a specific topic or population. People do it for needs assessments. They do it to find out more about support services. that, if they want to increase support services in their organization, or if they want to just find out an evaluation of what their program is, if they receive funding from a government organization or a grant to do a specific project, they want it evaluated, and that usually entails surveys. People want to know community attitudes. For example, as I mentioned, a couple of them, we did a survey for the Nevada Department of Transportation, specifically looking at highway maintenance in the state of Nevada, asking residents about their opinions on highway safety. We did another one for the Office of Traffic Safety, looking at seatbelt usage, car seat usage, and at the time when cell phones came out, texting and driving, distracted driving behavior. So we've done surveys on those. I'm currently doing a survey with DETR, which I had mentioned, DETR, on foreign labor wage surveys, where we're looking at the farmers in the state of Nevada on whether or not what their wage, the prevailing wages in the state of Nevada. There are many reasons in the justice system. For example, we do surveys on judicial, attitudes, jury attitudes, decision making, looking at specific attitudes towards specific crimes. I did a survey on human trafficking. We did another survey on victims of crime. I could go on. Marketing research. You guys have been asked to take many surveys about projects that not projects, but things you bought, things that, they ask you to evaluate restaurants. You get surveys all the time. People do it, as you know, in the election that's coming up. I'm sure you guys have got bombarded with many
Get
surveys.
on with
Not
it.
all of those are valid, by the way. They're called push polls, but anyway, that's something different. But there are lots of surveys that reasons people do surveys, primarily to make decisions and to form policy, to reform policy, to make changes within their organization. And in this case, to assess community attitudes, bias, and the potential impact of pretrial publicity.
Sounds like it's to gain information, and that's in order to make a decision.
Yes, decision making, and especially within their organizations, and then related to policy. We do a lot of policy change as well.
Did she really just say
actually presented
to gain
reports
information? We do
the
this to gain
legislature or
information.
whoever our clients are. Like, for example, the
And
seatbelt
Taylor.
survey that we did. We were trying to do a survey of
Don't ask
Nevada
dumb
residents to see
questions.
if they should have a primary seatbelt law in Nevada. I was involved in what we call Assembly Bill 122 in Nevada, where they were looking at the assisted living communities within the entire state of Nevada to see if there should
Right,
be
Billy? I know.
change in those
Yeah,
areas.
Patricia.
So those are some examples. And primarily, I guess a good example would be the behavioral health, BRFSS again, by the CDC. The biggest thing that we use that survey
Lord have
for is
mercy.
to look at population health and health outcomes. So we ask questions like behavioral risk that's related to how many fruits and vegetables do you eat in a day? How often do you exercise? We ask about drug practices, substance
We
abuse,
get it.
sexual practices, whether or not they've ever been told that they've had diabetes or a heart condition or asthma. So those are examples. So we look at the indicators that could predict.
We get it. You've done surveys on if people have done surveys. We get it. Shut up and get on with the main topic at hand.
Predict or have outcomes on the population health. So outcomes, basically.
I heard you mention community attitude surveys. Are you familiar with those?
Attitude
Yes, I
surveys.
mentioned a couple of the examples that we have done community attitudes on. And that's basically measuring attitudes of the community on a specific target population on specific measures of interest.
Did you have an occasion to review the community attitude survey that Dr. Edelman conducted
Yes, I did.
relating to venue issues?
Yes, I did. Excuse me. I forgot. I have these
Okay,
Exhibit F and F1. It's just my declaration and my expert report that I've already provided to the court.
okay. And I can see you just placed those face down. If you need to
Yes.
place them back face up, will you let me know?
Yeah, I will. Sorry. What was can you repeat the question?
That's okay. I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to review the survey work done and conducted by Dr. Bryan Edelman.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And Do you have an opinion about whether that survey was conducted in a valid way?
Yes, I do.
Right, Patricia?
What is your,
In my opinion, it was a valid survey.
what do you base that opinion on?
I just wish the judge would say, you know what? I get it. Can we get to the meat and potatoes here? Like I said, he's already got his mind made up. He knows what he's going to do. So all this fluff is just fluff at this point.
So there are standards and professional code of ethics that I mentioned earlier, suggested by AAPOR, again, AAPOR, American Association of Public Opinion Research, and the American Society of Trial Consulting, ASTC. And specifically,
Probably,
ASTC has a
Sheree.
section on venue change surveys.
He's trying not
And
to.
there are many things that can go into a survey to determine its validity and reliability. I guess I should talk about that before I go into that.
Really?
When you're talking about scientific reliability, by the way, it's very different than evidentiary reliability. So evidentiary reliability is looking at the trustworthiness of evidence, whereas scientific reliability
Really,
is looking at the
Mrs. King?
consistency.
I think he's just being
and,
nice and don't have the heart to tell her
repetition of
to
a
get on
survey
with it.
done over time, across different populations. And validity is more looking at trustworthiness or accuracy. So if we talk about reliability as consistency and stability of results, and validity as accuracy, that's how I'm going to talk about those things. And with respect specifically to this survey, there are many types of validity and many types of reliability, but I'm not going to go into all of them here. I think specifically for this survey, what's important is content validity, construct validity, measurement reliability, and response reliability, specifically with this survey, and looking at coverage error and what we would call external validity. There are other types, as I mentioned. There's criterion validity, there's inter-rater reliability, test-retest reliability, convergent validity. There's many types of validity, but I'm not going to talk about those here. I'm just going to talk about the things that made me come to my opinion or form my opinion based on the survey. According to the ASTC standards, we're doing a change of venue or community attitude survey to look at whether or not a change of venue should be conducted, or a change of venue might be considered. You want to look at 6 things. You have screener questions, you have case recognition questions, you have questions related to the source or the media where the information comes from, you have demographic information, and then case knowledge questions. I think I got them all. And that's what I was looking at with respect to the content. And those were all there.
Billy, it's live, or I would. I think we're like 1 minute behind.
In Dr. Edelman's survey. The other thing I looked at was the questions themselves. Do they have what we would call construct validity, which is basically, does the survey measure what it purports to measure? And then does it have content validity? Does it cover all those things? And it does. I mentioned that already. That's the content validity, those 6 items. And was it done in a way that you can consider it? The measurement was reliable, and I would say yes. I read the methodology was brief, but based on what I could gather from the report that Research Strategies did, they did all of the things that we would have done. I would have probably done a little bit more in terms of looking at, some of the disposition codes were just a little bit hard to determine, but that's not that important for this. What I would say is that they did everything we do in our lab. We are very strict, I would say strict when it comes to our methodology for our surveys, because we follow AAPOR, which is the strictest standards that you could follow for calling on a telephone survey, or what we call an RDD survey, random digit dialing. And primarily that's because we have to do the CDC survey, and the CDC survey follows the AAPOR guidelines. And so for all of our projects, whether it's BRF Assess, whether it's CDC or not, we follow the same protocol. So no matter what project we do, whether it be for NDOT or DETR or any of these other organizations that I mentioned, we would definitely follow the same protocol procedures. And that includes things like good questionnaire
Patricia.
construction and design. That's the first thing. In order to combat what we would call non-response bias, the first thing you look at is questionnaire design. Are the questions written in a way that would get the responses that you need? Do they have content validity? Are the questions valid? And by that, I mean, we look at things like question order. We look at the whether they're leading, whether they're loaded, whether they're double barreled, whether there's many, many things we look at. So I looked at that. And then we also look at how the survey was sampled. And according to research strategies, they did use a random digit sampling frame. And by that, that means they probably, I don't have all the details. I'm just going based on my opinion, my experience. What we do for our surveys is we order our sample from a sampling company, and we get replicates of phone numbers. And what that means is we get them in blocks of like 30, for example, and you would call your replicates of 30 phone numbers until completion. And that's to make sure that you are not biasing your sample. So you don't want to call. Here's an example. If you get 20,000 phone numbers, you don't want to call all 20,000 phone numbers just once. That's not how it works, because you're only getting those people that answer the phone on the first ring. So that's biasing. Also, you're reducing your response rate by doing that. So what we do is we call them in blocks of numbers, and we call them several times. From my understanding, they called them 4 times. Research strategies is they called once, if they didn't get a hold of them, they called 3 more times, they did callbacks. That's also proper protocol. We like to call our surveys at least 3 times during 3 different time periods, either the morning, afternoon, and evening. We also like to call them during the day and on the weekends. My survey lab that I run is open 7 days a week, and every single holiday except for Christmas, Thanksgiving, and believe it or not, Super Bowl Sunday. It's the other American holiday, apparently. Anyway, people get mad when you call them on Super Bowl Sunday versus Father's Day, Mother's Day, and Easter, believe it or not. But anyway, so we call these numbers at different times. And from what I could tell, they did follow-ups, they did different call timing, they did callbacks.
Judge found that very interesting.
They used
That was
both cell phone and
that was an
landline.
interesting little
It is
nugget.
customary practice now when you're looking at coverage validity, you want to get more you want to make sure you're getting the population that you're interested in. And now so many people have cell phones. So in our lab and most labs across the country now, we do like 90% cell phones versus 10% landline. Now it's customary because of the reduction in the number of people that have landlines. Anyway, those are some of the things that I looked at, and whether the questions themselves, like I said, were valid in terms of what they were being asked.
It sounds like
Did I answer the question?
you had a really
Okay.
thorough look
Okay.
Before you had your opinion as to whether the survey was valid.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion about whether it was reliable?
Yes, in terms of measurement reliability, which includes things like if you are an interviewer and you are asking questions, it could be biasing if you're not trained properly. And the mode of survey that you're doing for change of venue surveys, the typical mode is RDD surveys, which is phone surveys versus paper or in person. And so the interviewers must be trained and supervised. My understanding is that research strategy has been around for 20 plus years. So I'm assuming they're like our lab where they were trained properly and they have supervision where there's supervisors also supervising the interviewers. So that's another way to combat non-response bias, which includes refusal conversion training, which is, I think Dr. Edelman alluded to it earlier, things like software.
Okay, you guys, I'm going to turn my camera and mic off again, and then I'm going to go check on dinner and check on kiddo. I will have my phone with me in case they cut the feed or go on another break or make a decision. So I will be back if any of those things happen. Otherwise, I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay?
Refusals. If someone calls up and says, I'm making dinner, I'm too busy, I'm giving my kids a bath, I'm running to the store, whatever it is. We train the interviewers on how to handle those situations so that we don't get only the first person that answers the phone or only those people that are saying that they're busy. So that's all part of the training to make sure that we get at non-response.
Right. I think that you have answered my questions really well, but based on, just to sum it up, based on your look at the work done by Dr. Edelman with this survey, your opinion is that it's a valid survey.
Yes, basically it's what I would have done or what we would have done in our survey lab.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions right now, but hang on and prosecutor. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have no questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is it
Okay, that was easy.
so easy? So,
Thank you.
witness be released.
She may, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you for being here. It's very interesting. Help yourself, yeah, as much as you need.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right,
Fit for witnesses, Your Honor.
no more witnesses. Okay, any witnesses?
None from the state, Your Honor.
Okay, we prepared for argument?
Let's do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the decision to change venue rests on what you've heard today and the court's determination that there's a reasonable likelihood that all of the media coverage has impacted the impartiality of a Latah County jury. That comes from Paul and Shepard. Your Honor, it's important to think of that standard in light of the Constitution of the United States and the state of Idaho. Mr. Kohberger has a constitutional right to a fair trial by an impartial jury. And to guarantee that, this court must change venue. Your Honor can look at the media coverage in this case and know that it's prejudicial coverage. The amount of coverage is a huge amount of coverage. The kind of coverage is prejudicial coverage, and it's had an impact on the Latah County potential juror. The court can see actual prejudice by understanding the results of that survey. Reading the hundreds of comments from Latah County residents, you can see that the media has been prejudicial and it's actually prejudiced potential jurors in Latah County. The court can also presume prejudice by looking at this case as it is. It's an extreme case that comes out of the Haddon case in Idaho, and you can presume prejudice in an extreme case. You have heard all day long how much coverage this case garners. It's Latah County, it's bigger, it's a state of Idaho, it's nationwide, it's outside of the nation, it's continuous, it's every day. Social media, books have been written, primetime television shows have happened in this case. It just doesn't stop. And you know that this is prejudicial coverage as well. The state has agreed things that were surveyed are false media items. At least some of them. This is all before the other things contained in the media are subject to admissibility rules, even if they're awkward. Subject to cross-examination and full context explanation of what they mean. So you have this coverage that permeates the community. Bigger than the community, the state, bigger than the state, the nation, and this is an extreme case. The court should think about things that have happened in this courtroom too, when considering whether this is an extreme case and the amount of prejudice that exists. This court has issued courtroom rules to determine who can have a camera, where a camera can be. The court on our motion limited things and finally removed cameras from this courtroom, and the court right now is live streaming. That doesn't take care of all of it though. The live stream is captured and replayed almost in real time, if not real time. Everything that happens in this case is on social media, and all kinds of things that don't happen in this case run rampant in news stories and
True
social media
story.
stories and impact all of the jurors. It is particularly important when you're considering this extreme case to look at the size of this community. You heard a lot about that today. You heard how bias is created. And when you think about this little community and all of the people that spoke out early on about this case, that's how the bias starts in this case. People in this community have a lot of ownership in the case as well. They're connected to the case by being related to or knowing people that conducted the investigation. They're connected to the case by knowing the community leaders that have spoken out about the case. They're connected to the case by the relationship with the University of Idaho. That's a pretty tight connection. And that is how you have to think about the human bias that exists and how it cannot be fixed if we get to jury selection. Your Honor has to look at the content and know the content of the media and know that there hasn't been positive stories about Bryan Kohberger. It's negative stories. There's not a media story talking about Bryan Kohberger's right to be presumed innocent. There's not a media story talking about Bryan Kohberger being loved by his family. Nobody's talking about the good grades he achieved all through his undergraduate career and graduate programs. Nobody's talking about the dog that he loves and helped train. It's all negative. It's false. It's misleading. It's stuff that's rumor and never coming into court. There are things about his character that are just untrue that are out there. When you have this much information surrounding a case, it's an extreme case and it's all over the place. I don't want the court to think all this social media happens and it's not centered in Latah County and think that's okay, because it's just not. There's plenty that's centered in Latah County. I'm sure the court remembers where we started earlier today with the two pie charts that we were shown by Crusoe this morning. One talks about how big the coverage is in Latah County that projects into Latah County compared to how small of a piece of the pie of the whole population in Idaho that Latah County has. So that's a lot of coverage directed into Latah County, and that's the stuff. Those are the news stories, the nightly news that's coming into Latah County residents' TVs. That's their newspaper that they're going to get in the morning. But that's not all. Latah County has as much access to primetime news stories, as much access to Facebook groups, to different podcasts, to watch things on YouTube, to buy books containing this information. They have as much access to do that as anybody else. So you have to recognize how big the case is, how much coverage there is, and just how prejudicial the coverage is. You understand that, we understand that learning from Dr. L. O'Leary this morning when she talked about bias. So having that as a backdrop and thinking about the survey results that we just talked about, you can see that there is a huge correlation to the few media items that could be tested and prejudgment of guilt for Mr. Kohberger. And those are people in Latah County. You can see the case connections that are bigger than the other counties, and they just don't go away. You also should be aware that the coverage doesn't drop off. It's not going to stop. It may peak and it may dip a little bit. It comes right back up. You can expect that will continue. We have a pretty good schedule of hearings coming up for pretrial motions. The court issued a scheduling order a couple of months ago. And so you can expect that the interest in the case is going to pop back up every single time we have one of those hearings. And that's a lot of media coverage, and people in Latah County are going to see it and read it, and they're going to continue with their opinions. So what do we do? What do we do about it? It's tough. It's really tough in Idaho. There is a lot of case recognition, and there's prejudgment in Idaho, but there's hope. When you look at the survey and you recognize that in other parts of this state, people don't recognize as many media items as they do in Latah County. That's good, because that links right to prejudgment. So that's good. That's hope right there, that we can find a jury somewhere in this state to give Mr. Kohberger his right to a fair trial. It's also a much larger population, so the impact on people sitting on the jury would be much smaller. Imagine with me that we are here in June of 2025, and we're here, and we've seated 16 or so people over here. You're going to recognize some of them. People that sit in the courtroom in our audience that want to come and listen to the trial are going to see them. Even if they don't listen to the trial, people are going to know whose car leaves their driveway every morning to get to the courthouse by 8:30 for 3 solid months. And those jurors that sit over there are going to feel an immense amount of pressure to answer the call of the community to be safe. You can read those comments about what people in this community think about Mr. Kohberger and what they think would happen if the jury found him innocent. It's hard to imagine that one of those jurors who all of a sudden said, you know what, I'm not sure, and listened to more evidence and said, I'm really not sure. I don't think he did it. Are they going to be brave enough to do that, to write not guilty, to say not guilty, and to stand their ground? That comes right to impartiality, that the court has to be sure that that's not going to happen. And you can't be sure that there's a way to pick an impartial jury in this community. In Ada County, we don't have that. We don't have Canyon County, we also don't have that. Those are jurors that are not from this small, close-knit community. Those are jurors who aren't going to run into a police officer that investigated the case at the grocery store, or maybe somebody from the prosecutor's office at the jazz festival at the college. There are people who don't have those connections. The other difference that I think is really important to think about too is the location, the connection to the house where this happened. That has been a pretty big deal in the community and wider, but in the community, about whether the house should remain standing through trial or should be torn down. And there's been an awful lot of publicity about that. People in this community have an opinion one way or the other. We aren't going to know what their opinion is, but they're going to bring that into the courtroom. People in Ada County do not have. And why Ada? Why not Canyon, or why not Bannock? I think that's something that we should talk about. The easiest one to talk about is Bannock. The numbers look a little better there in a lot of regards, but it's a smaller community as well. And so I think that there's a danger that if the court says, I'm going to change venue and we're going to Bannock County, I think there's a danger with that small community. There could be more interest all of a sudden, and we may run into a bit of a problem. So that's why I'm not here telling you Bannock County, but if you tell us Bannock County, I think we have a lot better shot at seating an impartial jury than we do here in Latah. Canyon County is the second largest. And Your Honor, honestly, if the court says, let's change venue, let's go to Canyon County or Bannock County, I think we have a better shot.
My gut reaction says he's going to he's going to change. He's going to do it. I think he's going to do it. And the reason is because when she starts talking about these Bannock County or whatever, he puts his reading glasses on. If he wasn't thinking about it, if he was going to deny the change of venue, he wouldn't have even put his glasses on to look at whatever he's looking at. You know what I mean? I feel like he's going to do it.
Shot at getting an impartial jury. But we picked Ada County specifically because we're aware of the structure of that courthouse, the way it's set up. We're aware that there's at least some statewide precedent for moving these big cases to Ada County. And we're aware that it would be easier to get our jurors to and from that courthouse in a way that they wouldn't have to go through the media. They would be kept private and in secret and secure. It makes sense to focus on Ada County for a lot of those reasons. Your Honor, we are mindful that that's a lot of miles away from here. But at the end of the day, the interest that we have is to protect Bryan Kohberger's constitutional rights. His right to a fair trial is as important as our right to free speech, our right to bear arms, our right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And the right to a fair trial cannot happen in Latah County. There is way too much media coverage. It is biased media coverage. It has impacted the potential juror, and it causes bias in the potential juror. This is a tiny little community, and this case needs to move where there's a chance to get jurors that haven't prejudged guilt of Mr. Kohberger and will have the ability to be anonymous and not known by everybody else in the community. The pressure to convict here is great, and it won't be in Ada County. The venue needs to be changed.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Ms. Beatty?
Thank you, Your Honor.
She has a good argument. The defense.
The case law in this case just does not support a change of venue, given the evidence that the court has before it. The state does not disagree with counsel on what the appropriate standard is. The appropriate standard is that the defense has the burden of showing a reasonable likelihood that the defendant's ability to get a fair trial is going to be diminished as opposed to some other county, or put another way, a reasonable likelihood that pretrial publicity will deprive him of a fair trial. So in looking at the evidence the court has before it, we can start with Exhibit C. Those were the charts presented by TrueScope. And we can see in those charts that for at least 6 months on one of those line graphs that compared Ada County and Latah County, Ada County had significantly more coverage than Latah County. And that more recently, in the past couple of months, that line graph comes together again, and they're just a couple points off. The fact is, Your Honor, this case has media coverage everywhere. That is something that was acknowledged by the defense, and that is something that is abundantly clear in these surveys. So looking to Exhibit C, comparing Latah County and Ada County, it is clear that this could easily be a back and forth scenario where at some points Latah County is higher and at other points Ada County is higher. And it almost looks like we may have recently been headed in that direction as recently as a few weeks ago. In looking at the survey numbers, Your Honor, I'd like to talk about what these numbers from the survey actually say. Sorry. And I'd like to start by looking at Defense Exhibit F1, Dr. Dare. We don't dispute any of the testimony that she gave today. We don't dispute anything in her declaration. And one of the things in her declaration that she discussed was a 5% margin of error in surveys such as this, with 400 survey respondents in a population within the range of our population in Latah County and in the population of Ada County. So if we're talking about a 5% margin of error, according to the defendant's own expert, and we're looking at case exposure in Latah County of 98% and Ada County of 93%, those communities are within the margin of error. Looking at presumption of guilt among jurors who knew about the case, Latah County, 67%, Ada County, 68%, Canyon County, 69%, and Bannock County, 76%. Latah County, Ada County, and Canyon County are at best within the margin of error. And if these results are to be taken literally, Latah County has the lowest number of jurors who knew about the case who are going to presume Mr. Kohberger guilty. Now, when you zoom out and look at the survey results for presumption of guilt among all respondents, Latah County is at 66%, Ada County is at 64%, Bannock also at 64%, and Canyon at 62%. Again, you're within this margin of error here. I would also point the court to the fact that jurors among the total sample size who had no opinion about this case, potential jurors, survey respondents, Latah County had the highest number of folks who reported having no opinion about this case at 17%. Ada County, 12%, Canyon, 13%, and Bannock at 9%. And then again, jurors among the total sample who had no opinion about Bryan Kohberger, Latah County, 29%, Ada County, 25%, Canyon County, 23%, and Bannock County, 24%. Again, we have the highest number of survey respondents in Latah County saying that they have no opinion about the defendant. When you zoom out, this is the big picture. These are the questions that matter. The question is, which community is the most likely to give Mr. Kohberger a fair trial? We can split hairs and say, well, if this person knows this media item, then they're X% more likely to think he's guilty. That's not the big picture. Those are trees in the forest, but we're ignoring the forest. And if you're looking at the forest is which community has the least amount of bias. And there are obviously some personal connections in Moscow and to the University of Idaho. The state does not dispute that. We believe those can be dealt with through other measures short of venue change. But when it comes to bias itself within a community, the court can take this entire 300+ page document of all of the survey responses and look at these surveys and see that the pervasive media coverage across the entire state has simply created some complications and difficulties. Those are not unique to Latah County. The more productive conversation to have is how can we craft questionnaires that will ask jurors factual questions that help us identify sources of bias? For example, are you employed by the University of Idaho and how? Or did you know one of the victims? Things like that are factual that will allow us to then follow up and ask more questions. And frankly, Your Honor, the state would be willing as we approach trial to engage in good faith discussions with defense counsel and the court about potentially just excusing some jurors who are too factually close to the case for cause from the outset. We're willing to have that discussion. Another thing that the court can do that would address some of the concerns that were testified to regarding bias and social pressures is to allow potential jurors to have individual voir dire and outside the presence of other jurors and outside the presence of cameras or audio recording that are being live streamed. In this case, it's going to be critically important that potential jurors who come to jury duty feel like they can give honest answers and feel like they can be forthright. And in order to do that, I think individual voir dire would be very appropriate, and the court has that option available to it. I think another possibility that the court should consider, particularly after looking at Exhibit C and those line grabs where we're talking about peaks in media coverage, is sealing some potential hearings coming up. And the defense may not want to seal certain hearings for good reason. We're not asking the court at this point to seal all hearings going forward, but the state believes that there may be certain evidentiary hearings. For example, if the state files 404B notices or motions in limine related to the evidence, some of that information might be extremely prejudicial, and the state would agree to seal hearings where prejudicial information is going to come out in that hearing. And that too is a tool that the court has before it to alleviate some of those peaks in media coverage, because of course, part of the court's consideration is going to be the intensity of media coverage over the life of the case. And so one way that the court can address that is by sealing certain hearings, and the parties can use good faith and seal certain motions or briefs addressing prejudicial information temporarily until the trial is complete. When we're talking about bias and individuals who come to court for jury selection, I think it's important to remember that we have to deal with what the law says. And what the law says is that voir dire and jury selection is the appropriate process for ferreting out bias. We don't get to hand wave the jury instructions that are based in case law and that are handed to us by the Idaho Supreme Court. We don't get to hand wave those and refer to them as indoctrination and act like all potential jurors are going to come to court and lie, that they can't be trusted. Now, certainly there are some human biases, but a good voir dire is the tool to address those. And we don't get to just burn the system down. That's not what we're here to do. we have to use the voir dire process. I would also point out that when we're looking at, well, actually, Your Honor, let's talk about some numbers. Let's assume, we've heard a lot about the Daybell case. Let's assume that this court decides to summon 1,800 jurors. Let's assume that this court decides to seat a jury of 12 with 6 alternates, given that it's going to be a very long trial. If this court were to summons a jury of 1,800 jurors, which was the amount that was summoned in Ada County in Daybell, this court could just as easily summons 1,800 jurors in Latah County with a prospective jury pool of 32,000 as a court could summons 1,800 people in Ada County. It doesn't matter that Ada County's population is 16 times higher than the population in Latah County, because in Ada County, the court, if the court moves this trial to Ada County, is not going to say, well, we're in Ada County, I guess I'll summons in 20,000 jurors. That's not how it works. This court could just as easily summons in 1,800 jurors in either location. And if this court were to summons 1,800 jurors, only 1 in 100 would have to qualify to sit on a jury in order for this court to proceed to trial. So if you look at that 1,800 number and you look at some of the survey numbers, let's look at total prejudgment. Total prejudgment by total sample. 17% of Latah County jurors had no opinion on total prejudgment. That sounds low, but when you look at it out of a jury pool of 1,800, that's over 300 people walking into this courthouse with no opinion about the case. You look at the question, given what you have read, seen, or heard about this case, would Bryan Kohberger have a difficult time convincing you that he is not guilty of murder? 19% said no, 16% said no opinion. You add those up and you have over 600 jurors out of an 1,800 person jury pool who would answer that question in that way. What is your opinion of Bryan Kohberger? No opinion, 29%. That's over 500 jurors that would come into this courthouse with no opinion of Bryan Kohberger. A large jury pool is a solution to the media coverage in this case, and this court is going to have to summon a large jury pool wherever this court holds this trial, whether it's in Ada County, whether it's here, whether it's in Bannock County, or whether it's in Camden County. And frankly, Your Honor, as we move toward the issue of convenience, if anything, these survey numbers being so close to one another and so tight with each other should tell the court that if the court did determine that a venue change was appropriate, if the court made that determination, Kootenai County or Nez Perce County would be a far more logical choice, because those are geographically closer and the state would not have to pick up and move all of its evidence for 3 months down 300 miles to Boise. The court would now have to move its entire court staff. People could still go home. There would be less witness travel expenses. So if the court decides to change venue, the court should look at more convenient options closer to Latah County. Either Kootenai County or Nez Perce County would alleviate some of the concerns laid out by the defense about the connections to the university or the connections to Moscow itself. But again, even looking at the survey on those issues of connections to Moscow or connections to the university, 39% of folks in Latah County visited or walked by the home where the murders occurred. 60%, nearly 60% didn't. That means that out of a jury pool of 1,800, over 1,000 people would not have gone by the home where the murders occurred. Are you or a family member, student, or employee at the University of Idaho in Moscow? 75% of folks in Latah County said no. That's 1,300 out of 1,800. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, Your Honor, but a large jury pool alleviates these concerns so much better than simply moving venue to another locale where the public sentiment is so close that it's within the margin of error, or if you're taking these survey results literally, worse. That makes no sense, Your Honor. The other option that the court has available to it would be to bring in a jury pool from Nez Perce. Again, the state does not believe that a venue change is warranted given the evidence that the court has before it. But if the court were persuaded that Latah County jury could not successfully be sat in this case, the court could bring in jurors from Nez Perce County. Lewiston is approximately 30 minutes away. It would certainly be a longer drive for them, but the court could deal with that in scheduling and make those accommodations. It has many months to prepare to do that. Moving to the convenience issue, I think it's important to note that Latah County is not a tiny little community. Latah County might be close-knit, but it is not a tiny little community. Latah County is one of the top 25% of most populated counties in the state of Idaho. It's 11th out of 44 counties in Idaho. There are 32,000, according to Dr. Ellman, jury-eligible citizens in Latah County. It is not so tiny that we could not summons in a jury of 1,800, a jury pool of 1,800 folks. Since the convenience argument focuses primarily on Ada County, that's what I'm going to address today. So starting with the size of courthouse and the ability to house parties and court staff, it's already built into the Latah County Courthouse for the court to have a place to go, for the court's employees to have a place to go, for court staff, for the court staff attorney. All of that is built into the Latah County Courthouse. Unlike moving to Ada County, where the courthouse would have to accommodate the court and all the court staff. Similarly, the prosecutor's office and their staff already built into the Latah County Courthouse. No separate accommodations would be needed. The defense will have to have accommodations wherever they go, and certainly they are entitled to privacy and accommodations that will allow them to prepare for this extensive trial. They absolutely should have that. But they are going to have to find those accommodations regardless of where this trial is located, unless it does get moved to Kootenai County. And so keeping this trial in Latah County would be a lesser burden on the Latah County Courthouse, in the sense that they would simply have to find accommodations for the defense team rather than finding accommodations for everyone. As to juror space and security, as well as the argument of overall security, it is true that the Ada County Courthouse has a precedent of handling large trials. And it is true that Ada County does a very good job with that. But the reason Ada County does a very good job with handling these high-profile cases with security, with court staff, with organization, with getting jurors in and out in an organized fashion, the reason Ada County does a good job with that isn't because Ada County has a physically bigger courthouse. It's because Ada County has diligent, competent, and professional staff. And I have every reason to believe that with the 9 months we have until trial, that this court staff here and security could also have the time to prepare and make operation plans and all of the things that go into having a trial of this magnitude. I have no doubt that they can accomplish that with careful planning and preparation over the many months between now and trial. It is also my understanding that there is a means to bring jurors securely into this courthouse outside of the public view. Moving on to the cost of travel expenses, council referenced the cost of transportation to and from the airport and correctly noted that the Spokane Airport is considerably further from the Latah County Courthouse than the Boise Airport is from the Ada County Courthouse. That's absolutely correct. However, the Lewiston Airport is a shorter drive, again, about 30 minutes, and does connect to some major airport hubs. That would be another option. But even taking into account that there may be some additional rental car expense for the few out-of-state witnesses that we're going to have, that would be negated and then some by transporting all of the local witnesses from Latah County down 300 miles to Boise,
Because your
by
mind's in the
paying
gutter
for
stuff.
accommodations in Boise for the court and court staff, the prosecutor's office and prosecutor's office staff, and the many local witnesses that will be testifying in this trial. There's also the logistical issue of transporting evidence for a 3-month trial, the chain of custody issues, the evidence tech from the Moscow Police Department, and it's my understanding there's only one, taking him out of his role up in Moscow here for 3 months and having him in Boise, trying to manage this evidence in a location that we would also have to arrange for, and dealing with the chain of custody issues, transporting the evidence back and forth. I think the court can also consider, since this is a pretty broad standard on the convenience side of things, the effect of prosecutors and law enforcement being away from the community for up to 3 months. And I think the court should also consider the nature of Latah County itself. The infrastructure of Latah County, and specifically Moscow, which has a university of nearly 12,000 students, is that this community is tailor-made to expand and contract with the rhythm of the school year. So this isn't going to be a situation where there aren't enough hotels or aren't enough restaurants. This town, as well as neighboring Pullman, which provides additional accommodations, is designed to handle large influxes of people. That should not be any concern for the court at all. Again, we are not talking about a tiny community here. We are talking about a mid-sized town that's on the, frankly, on the larger side for counties within this state that can amply accommodate a jury trial of this magnitude, particularly in the summer months where you don't have these major academic events. Finally, since we are talking about the interests of justice in the convenience prong
She
of the
said the
rule,
word
it is
finally.
completely appropriate for the court to also consider the fact that most of the victims' families, not all of them, but most of them, live closer to Latah County than they do to Boise. That means that for them, traveling to this trial, which they will have a constitutional right to attend, and again, we're only asking the court to consider this in the convenience prong, will be much easier for them and more convenient for them than it would be for them to have to travel hundreds of miles to Boise. I think the court can and should consider that factor as well. Your Honor, at the end of the day, these surveys have given the court a factual basis to deny this motion to change venue, and we hope that's what the court decides to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty.
Oh, come on, Judge.
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you, Judge. Remember, as I sat and listened to Ms. Beatty talking
No.
about all of the prejudicial coverage and how there's a problem in other counties as well as Latah County, it really struck me that everybody knows how prejudicial this media coverage is. Everybody knows that. And that's really the question the court has to answer today. Has there been prejudicial media coverage that there's a reasonable likelihood that it impacts the impartiality of the jury, that it impacts Mr. Kohberger from getting a fair trial? Don't think about county's numbers. Don't think about Canyon County's numbers, and don't think about Bannock County's numbers. Think about Latah County's numbers. Your first.
We should have started playing like an hour and a half ago a drinking game where every time I yawn, y'all take a drink. This would have been a whole lot more entertaining after an hour, right? If we were all playing that drinking game, because I have yawned my head off.
Question is, do you grant the motion to change venue to protect his constitutional rights? Don't get mixed up in thinking, well, Ada County's numbers aren't so great either. Maybe Canyon County's numbers aren't so great either. You have to make this decision based on what's going to happen in Latah County. You know, the jurors have been exposed to prejudicial media. You know that there's been an impact on you. You know that that's going to be really hard to ferret out in a jury selection moment. And if you know all that, you have to change venue. You can't just say, well, it's bad in Ada County too, so I won't change venue here. The question for the court is, in the county in which Mr. Kohberger is
I don't
charged,
blame you, Sherry.
can you seat a fair and impartial jury? And that answer is no, you cannot. The court then has to decide, what do we do? But answer the first question first. Answer the first question first. And don't be tempted to say, well, maybe we could go to Kootenai County, maybe we could go to Nez Perce County. We don't have any surveys on them. We don't have any information on them, except we know that Dr. Edelman pulled a couple hundred stories from the Lewiston Tribune and looking at the local media coverage because of the closeness of Moscow and Lewiston. And except that we know that people in Lewiston have the same nightly news as those in Moscow. And by the way, so does Kootenai County. KXLY that broadcasts all the stories on their nightly news, that happens at my house, it happens at Mr. Thompson's house, and it happens to somebody who's from Lewiston too. That's the same news. The difference is the newspapers, and the difference is the community connection and what that means in this case. So don't be tempted to go to another county we haven't surveyed. We've surveyed a lot of comparative counties. Stay in the place where your decision rests on what's going on here in Latah County. For sure, when we do get to jury trial, you should do individual court. For sure, we should do a jury questionnaire, and we should talk amongst all of us and try to figure out if we can excuse some jurors before they're ever brought in. They should never be on camera. We should try to keep them as anonymous as we can. Those are all things that we absolutely must do.
I agree with that.
To be the very most protective, you have to answer the first question. And that question is, we have to get this case out of Latah County. That's an important decision, and it's important to make now. We're 9 months from trial, and we need to have the venue issue settled. We need to be able to have our subpoenas out. We need to have our experts plan. We need to have time set aside. I've got my time set aside, but we need to have our experts be able to get tickets and reservations for hotels.
I put a poll up,
Don't
put
answer
a
all the
poll up
questions
in the
at
chat.
once, Your
You
Honor.
guys
Answer
go
the
vote,
first
go
one
vote.
first,
Go vote, go vote, go vote.
and then think about where it's most reasonable to have the trial. Think about the differences in the community.
I hope that he makes his decision tonight, like before we leave, or I'm going to be big mad. Big mad.
But answer the first question first. We can't have this trial here. There is no way Mr. Kohberger can get a fair and impartial jury.
Ms. Taylor? Well, not to give you a decision now. Number one, I would say this is probably professionally the most difficult decision I've ever had to make.
Did he say that he wasn't going to give a decision right now? Is that what he just said? Or did he say he has to give a decision right now? What did he say? Hold on a minute.
Well, not to give you a decision now. Number one, decision now. Well, not to give you a decision now. Number one, I would say this is probably professionally the most difficult decision I've ever had to make.
I'm so disappointed.
Both sides, okay, have made really solid positions and supported that. I know there are a lot of considerations, practical, in terms of logistics and prejudicial media. So I have some work to do. I'm going to go through everything. Okay, even if I got most of everything, but that's going to take me a little bit of time, and go through the law again, too, including the rule itself and the interpretation of that. So,
Judge, come on. Really? He's going to make me pull Angry Bev out. He has done made me pull Angry Bev out and Face and Eyes. Face and Eyes. I'm big mad, big mad. What I want to know is, why is it going to take you? I know that you have things you got to do. I really didn't think that you would come with a decision today, but I hoped you would, because you've had forever and 3 days already. You don't need all this survey information.
I'll do my best.
Ugh.
It's a challenge. So
God.
that's probably all I should say at this point. But I listened carefully all day, and I thought there was some really important things to think about, both sides, and that's what I'm going to do. So with that, I will adjourn and take care.
Oh.
Have a good rest of the week. Thank you all.
He done got me mad now. Oh. Let me get my gavel. Gabble, gabble. I know it's not a gabble, it's a gavel. But. Rawr, rawr, rawr. QB's like, Switzerland. Ay, 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 ay. All right. So, Steph says, I don't even care. The poll should be, was Jenny's song the best part of this live? The answer is yes. I don't even know what song I sang. Blockbuster emote here. Another hearing that could have been an email. Yeah. I know, Morgana. That's how I feel too. This judge loves hearings. He likes to hear the hearings. Yeah, right, Cherie? Switzerland. AKA my ex. What do you mean? It's impossible to get this judge to decide on anything, right? Jeez. See, these Kohberger pretrial hearings are always awful. I mean, I want to tell this judge to get control of get control of your courtroom, and 2, pee or get off the pot. Right, Patricia. He hates making decisions. I feel that. I'm not good at making decisions either. If you give me more than 2 choices, forget it. It'll take me 2 years to make a decision on whether we're having corn or peas for dinner. But and whenever the whole chick was doing we do this survey for hair color, we do this survey for whether it's pronounced Morgana or Morgana, we do this survey on how TMI Steph really is, we do this survey on Miss King. Is she really the king, Miss King of anything? I mean, we do a lot of surveys, Judge. And so every time she was talking about these surveys for this and the surveys for that, all I could hear was Bubba Gump. Or not Bubba Gump. What was his name? Bubba, whatever his name was on Forrest Gump, saying shrimp and grits, fried shrimp, boiled shrimp. I mean, that like, yeah. I know, Steph, these hearings, I have never been impressed with any of the Kohberger hearings. They're every one, really all that from that. Right, Morgana surveyed the absolute crap out of this judge. How did I miss the survey about me, says Steph? I don't know. QB said was my ex's nickname. He was also a judge, but only Switzerland in our marriage. Gotcha. Very boring, I know. Let's take a poll. Next time there's a hearing, we'll watch it the day after and fast forward. Jeez. Yeah, I did. The docket. The docket just tweeted, you really didn't think he'd rule from the bench, did you? Yeah, I did. I was praying he would. Ay. He wasn't talking to me. He literally just tweeted this, I was like, dude, better grant it or deny it. The docket really tweeted, "You really didn't think he'd roll from the bench, did you?" Yeah, I really did. That freaked you out, QB? Did you get that at the same time I did? I was like, "Are you talking to me, bro?" I got the message from Cologuard today. I got the message, QB. The text, the text literally said, "Yo, poop in that box and send it back, or else." Or so help me, so help me. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I got to go eat, get my kid in the bed, and then I got other things I got to take care of tonight. So I love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't know what the topic will be. I told QB today I'm going to have to start making a content calendar or a content schedule, sort of a, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, QB tomorrow. I'm waiting on you, ma'am. As soon as QB's ready, we're going to dive into some Sandra Birch more. Well, I mean, we're going to dive into some Sandra Birchmore and Matthew Farwell court docs. So, yeah, QB. Oh, you said let's go? So tomorrow, is that what we're going to do tomorrow? We're going to do some court documents tomorrow for Matthew Farwell? Yes, you will, Sherry. Yes, you will. All right, I'm going to get out of here. So, I can't, Stephanie. I can't today, baby. It's almost 8 o'clock, and we got to do supper and bedtime routine for the kiddos, and yeah. Right, Steph. Right. Yeah. All right. Love you guys, and we will see you. We will be back tomorrow. All right. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Make sure to hit that thumbs up before you leave. Let me end the poll real quick. I don't know why I'm even going to bother in this daggone poll, because goodness knows it don't make a hill of beans difference. So the question was, will Judge grant the daggone venue, change of venue, or deny it? 87% of you said grant it. 12% of you said deny it. I guess I should have had a third option of, I don't know. We won't find out today. Option C, neither. Right. I'm big mad, Judge. All right. I think that's it. Hashtag replay in the comment section down below if you're watching this on the replay. I do have memberships available. You guys, hold on just a second. Here, hold on. Copy. I have memberships available. Look, QB, you're going to be proud of me. I'm actually going to promote it right now before we get out of here. There is a link in the chat if you have not yet and want to join the membership to the Crime Cafe. She did it right behind me. You cracked me up. I had it available. I have it in my little notepad on the computer so I can pop it into the description boxes and stuff. But anyway, yeah. All right. You guys have a fantastic evening, and I will see you tomorrow with lots of cool stuff. All right. Bye.